This is the Art of Darkness podcast with Kevin Kautzman.
And Brad Kelly. We're a couple of very online writers interested in the dark side of what drives creative people to create against all odds.
This show is about art and the people who make it, what it costs them, and what it takes to bring something unique and impactful into the world.
Each episode, we excavate the life and work of an artist you might think you know.
Don't worry, they're all safely dead.
On every episode, we try and find out just what the hell was wrong with them and how they worked through their darkness to create something that lives on after them and continues to move culture.
Find us online at artofdarkpod.com and on Twitter at Kevin Kautzman and at Brad Kelly. Art of Darkness, we're back. This is going to be a banger. I'm really alarmed at like how much I've been anticipating this.
Okay, good.
Yes,
good.
I'm Kevin Kautzman with my co-host Brad Kelly. Brad, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I've spent a lot of time in Frank Herbert world, which is cool, actually. So I think we've got some secrets to spill and some interesting stories to tell here. So
I'm a little frightened. I really am.
Yeah.
I'm a little afraid of what this is. You know? Like we're talking about, again, we go for big air on this show. Absolutely. It's Valhalla or nothing, right?
And Frank Herbert we're going to get into it. He is big air. It's interesting, though. As a writer, I feel like he's one of the more famous writers that people don't really know much about his personal life, it seems.
Yeah, he's like a void.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing.
Even in this Dune movie that just came out, there's not a lot of like Frank Herbert's Dune. There's not a lot of, it's just Dune. It's just a thing. He created something that's almost bigger, that's bigger than him. And they said, you're starting a cult. Right.
If you write a book and they come to you and go, oh, you're starting a cult.
Yeah.
That's you've written your book.
Right. I mean, usually when people say something is a cult hit, it's kind of like a quaint, it means some weirdos like it.
Yeah.
This means
it's
like, you could have started a cult with
literally we're blasting off into space. Yeah.
Yes.
I love this. I'm really excited. I rewatched the new film and it washed over me finally.
Okay.
Yeah, it landed after the second time.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the first of the Lynch version. Yeah,
The Lynch version's quite good. I just watched the Lynch version yesterday. I hadn't seen it in probably 10 or 15 years, and so that was cool. Yeah. There's a lot of similar, like it's more similar to the new one. There's huge differences, but it's actually more similar to the new one than I had thought.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Yes, it is. So, it's beat for beat, kind of. Yeah. We're gonna unpack Dune.
Yes. Yes.
I'm a little concerned about. Yeah. It's a Sunday night. Yeah.
Yeah. Might as well settle in and talk,
with this, Art of Darkness. That's what we do. That's it. Yeah. Great American writer. Was he from California?
He was from the Pacific Northwest, so he's from the Tacoma area. Yeah. So before we get into the show, I wanted to make a note to thank our patrons on Patreon. Mm-hmm. We've had some people signing up. It's very exciting for our humble show to have people who are willing to click through and give us some hard-earned cash. If you are on Patreon, if you are a patron, you know that you get, after each episode, you get a little 20 to 30 minute extra conversation that's exclusive to patrons. And if you're not, that's our big incentive to sign up, is we go on for another 20 or 30 minutes. It's a little more off the cuff. We save one good nugget from our research, and we're going to do that tonight too, that we only share with the Patreon our Patreon members. So thanks, guys. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We're paying for books, and we're paying for web hosting, and all that stuff. So it helps.
Yeah, support the show.
Yeah. So
artofdarkpod.com.
That's right. And if you want to go, you can find a Patreon link on there quite easy. There's other ways to support too. We just released a really cool looking coffee mug with our brand new logo. And we also have a bookshop.org link. It's an affiliate link. We get a few pennies on the dollar if you buy a book through that link. So with that, Kevin, what do you know about Frank Herbert?
He is from the Pacific Northwest.
Huh.
Yes, truly.
Yeah.
That's as much as I know, which is interesting because he's such a force.
Right. And I realized this as I was going into this. This is the example probably of the ratio of how much I like his book to how little I know about him is probably the biggest ratio.
Right. Yeah. There's no, I mean, I know that H.P. Lovecraft is from Baltimore and right?
Yeah,
You vaguely have a sense of someone. There's no one bigger than Frank Herbert.
Not really.
In terms of like, he did it.
Yeah.
He wrote the book. It's majestic. It's the greatest. It's a vision.
And and critically and commercially too.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's
one
sell 50 million copies of books and also be respected by critics.
No one says Dune is overrated.
Right.
No one.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's pretty much you either love it or you haven't read it. So so we'll get into it. I want to start with a Frank Herbert quote from Dune that I think is interesting in the context of his life, and it's also just a paragraph that I quite like, so I feel like this is a good place to start. So this is from Dune. Greatness is a transitory experience. It is never consistent. It depends in part upon the myth-making imagination of humankind. The person who experiences greatness must have a feeling for the myth he is in. He must reflect what is projected upon him, and he must have a strong sense of the sardonic. This is what uncouples him from belief in his own pretensions. The sardonic is all that permits him to move within himself. Without this quality, even occasional greatness will destroy a man. So I like that. We're talking about a great man. This is his views on greatness. We're talking about a book that's in some ways about the idea of greatness in some ways, right? The pitfall, the ups and downs of it. So, so we'll start. Just give you kind of a little background on Frank. Obviously, this is what we do here, is we're going to dig into his whole life, but just to give you kind of a primer so we know kind of who and where we are. Frank Herbert, American writer, one of the best-selling science fiction writers of all time, arguably the best-selling science fiction writer of all time, best known for Dune.
Finally made Dune. That's the other thing. I'm sorry. They finally made Dune.
It's the dream.
I'm very happy.
Yeah, me too. I feel like they finally
perfect. It will never be perfect.
Never going to make it perfect. No. It's too much.
It's too much.
But Dune sold just Dune. Now there's several books in the series. Just that first book has sold 20 million copies, right? Which is insane.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
It's been adapted to film 3 times with 2 other attempts. And on top of Dune, he would eventually write 6 other installments of the Dune series. They would all get just progressively weirder.
Yeah, but they're bangers too.
Oh yeah,
like they're also very good.
Yeah, I read Dune Messiah, and we're going to read a bit from Dune Messiah, which is the second one.
They're very good,
top notch.
Yeah,
it's a great novel.
It's great writing, all the way through.
And the writing itself, paragraph to paragraph, which is kind of rare in hard sci-fi, is legit. Like you feel like you're reading like a Herman Hesse novel or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But okay, obviously Frank Herbert, you don't get to the point where you're selling 20 million books overnight. So I want to start somewhere a little different. So my primary source in this, which is there's pros and cons to my primary source. It's a book called Dreamer of Dune. It's a biography of Frank Herbert written by his son. So the challenge to that is, okay, on the plus side, you've got a lot of legitimate insight into sort of family life that nobody else would really be able to tap into. On the other side, you've got a little bit of hero worship going on, right? There's a little bit of my dad invented the hole-in-one kind of thing going on. You know what I mean? There's a little
par
bit
3, hole-in-one. Right. My dad's he's a dynamite. Yeah, good guy.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of that. So
fair enough. Yeah.
But there's also the fact that he is a unique figure, right? You don't get to write a book like Dune without being in some way remarkable. So
sure. Yeah.
So, but I want to start a little different than how we might normally start an episode like this. And I want to talk about the primary woman in Frank Herbert's life, Beverly Herbert. Okay. And I'm going to start with this quote of something she said, and it's later in their life. And I just want to have this at the back of our mind. Beverly Herbert, she's talking to her, Brian Herbert, so her daughter-in-law. She's talking to her daughter-in-law, and she says, "I'm fighting this thing, Jan, and I'll be damned if it's going to get me. Not when Frank and I have reached the point where we can begin enjoying our accomplishments." Right. So just think about what this could sort of mean. So who was this lady? Beverly Herbert was born in 1926 in a creative writing class at the University of Washington. In 1946, she meets Frank Herbert. She's immediately attracted to him, but this isn't 2020. It's, just immediately go, screw his brains out.
Yeah, well, but they met in a writing class?
They met in a writing class, yeah.
All right. Okay.
Now,
let's go.
Yeah, so she and Frank in this writing class were the only two people who'd ever published anything. She had sold a story to I think it was Modern Romance magazine, and he had sold one or two. He'd sold a Western story and maybe a science fiction story. They're pretty young. So everybody else, there's a little bit of a we're in a kind of a class of our own here. Yeah. So he would have to pursue her pretty hard though before they would go on a date. He would do some things that we would probably call stalking now, figuring out where she studied in the library and dropping by, figuring out where she ate lunch, generally getting the sense of her schedule, and whoopsie daisy. Oh, hey, Beverly, how are you?
Yeah, the spice must flow.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And he was impressed right off the bat by her intelligence. He thought she was a very, very talented writer. And he saw her act as a witch in a production of Macbeth that was going on at the campus.
She was one of the three witches.
Yes, yeah,
that's amazing.
This production.
This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
The theater people. People. Yeah, bring it. Let's go. Yeah.
So
you don't understand until
Well, and after he saw that, he told his friend, I'm going to marry this woman.
Yeah.
And they hadn't really even gone on a formal date, right? But very quickly,
that my dad was from Washington, right? My family, I have family out in Washington. Yeah, okay. Maniacs. Yeah, they're all insane.
It's a cool part of the country.
For sure. That's very real.
Yeah. So they get married very quickly, though. They get married June of 1946, and this is right around the time Frank actually drops out of college. So they meet, and it's she resists it a little bit, as she probably should.
He was stalking her,
right, and then immediately they're married, and they're married till.
But he was too young to end up in the war.
Well, we're going to get there. So I'm telling the Beverly story, and real quickly, and then we're going to get the Frank story. So, and this is actually Frank's second wife, and we'll explain that. He's born a little bit earlier. He's born in 1920. This is 26 at this time.
Fair enough. This is the thing I love about this show, though, is that it's all starting to make sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You start to recognize the patterns.
The patterns, the rhythm. Yeah.
Yeah. So Beverly was, and there was the reason where I'm starting with her. She was an amazing woman. Frank couldn't have done what he did without her. And I feel like I want to give her credit in some way. Right. She would stick with him, every single up and down. Sometimes she was the sole breadwinner with copywriting gigs while Frank was, on some harebrained scheme, or he had quit some job or gotten laid off or whatever. They moved to Mexico a couple times. He experiments with off-grid living. There's IRS problems. And Beverly is there for all of it, right?
Dynamo. Okay, good.
She was also the first reader on a lot of his work, and Frank believed that she understood what he was doing more than anybody else.
That's awesome.
So,
None of this happens in a vacuum.
It really doesn't. And one big thing is she believed in Frank probably more than Frank did. Right. So they had that. And I think when you look at the whole life, you kind of realize that that's sort of what made it happen. She was also highly capable she was task oriented and highly capable had highly capable organizational skills. So eventually she would run Frank Herbert Inc. Right.
He did a lot of drugs though, right? There were serious drugs. We're getting ahead of,
Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yeah. I will say, I will also say that Brian Herbert his son in the biography is very charmingly like, yeah, Dad smoked weed once, and one time he got peyote, but he threw up. That's it. And I'm like, we'll see. But I got some dirt on that.
Okay,
that good. Mostly,
all right.
Mostly for the After Dark.
Ooh, After Dark.
Yeah. So okay. So So Beverly basically runs Frank Herbert Inc., especially when he starts to become, more successful, keeping track of the paperwork, taking care of correspondence, making sure the bills are paid, and all of that.
So hang on. So they meet in their 20s.
Yeah, Frank is 26. She's 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
In Washington.
In Washington. Yeah.
And they're married very quickly.
Within months, they get
within
married.
Months. Okay.
Yeah. She, on top of being, sort of left-brained enough to like basically run a business, she was highly intuitive. She read tarot cards and astrological charts. Frank referred to her as his white witch. There is like a witch that practices white magic.
No, I'm familiar with what that is.
Yeah.
I'm not a racial thing. No, I'm like asking like what?
Yeah, I got a little bit I want to read on this.
These are some hippies.
Oh, they are hippies.
Oh, super hippie people. Yeah. That's cool.
Okay, so here's one thing. She could find stuff when nobody else knew, lost objects, for instance. So here's a little bit from the biography. And this is Brian Herbert, so it's probably a little embellished, but this is the vibe of Beverly. On one such fishing trip, my parents were on a river near North Bend, Washington. During the day, Dad had been off fishing, performing his hunting and gathering role, while Mom worked around their rented cabin. When he returned with his catch, he discovered he had lost the packet containing fishing flies and hooks that had been given to him by one of his grandparents. It had sentimental as well as practical value, and he was upset. She told him not to worry, that she would find it. He had been all over the river fishing, not staying in one place at all. Still, she led him directly to an area of unusual rocks where she knelt over a hole, reached in, and retrieved the missing gear. Right. So and there's numerous reports from people that she could like do weird stuff like this.
She was a witch. He was married to a witch. The Bene Gesserit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's real. It's real. It's not a LARP. It's real. Witches are real.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they are often on the stage.
Yes, that would be a place to find them, especially in the modern era. That would be where you.
Yes, sure. Indeed. Yeah.
There's another thing. She could read people's palms, and she later in life apparently tried not to do it very often because she once touched the hand of a friend of hers, got this very strong vibe, and told the friend that to be very careful because you're going to get into a serious accident. Shortly later, this friend of Beverly's was in a intense car accident and ended up with severe brain damage. So Beverly's in touch with the pneuma, for sure. It's
fascinating. I don't know how many different ways to tell people that like the magic is in the theater. I'm a nerd, right? Sure. But it's like if you want to experience, that just
that's a place to do it. For
where it starts. Yeah.
Also on Beverly, and then we're going to get to more Frank here in just a second, but she was a skilled writer in her own right. She tried to get 2 novels published, but it seemed like she didn't deal all that well with criticism necessarily. And it's not that she didn't deal well with it. I think she didn't quite have the grit to do revision 5, revision 6, revision 7. She's a pretty talented writer, and she just kind of didn't, I think, have that next level of push. She wasn't an obsessive like Frank was. About it, so I mean,
this is the thing about Dune, and I haven't reread it recently, but just there is a level of autism in Dune where you just go, you're obsessing over this world building, to a degree that is irrational,
right?
And that's the fun. And and as soon as you start Dune posting on Twitter, everyone has an opinion.
Everyone does,
Every autistic person has an opinion.
It's funny. I kind of didn't realize and I should have known better, but until the news of the new Dune movie came out, Dune kind of felt like this book that just I knew. It felt like
a
my
secret.
Book.
Right.
Kind of. Strangely. And there's millions of people that feel like that, apparently.
Yeah, right. That's some sort of like secret. It feels like some sort of a Bible or yeah, I need to reread it. It's a thing that you find when you're like 15 years old that makes sense to you.
Oh, all precocious teenage boys should be given Dune immediately.
Yeah. Is Jd Salinger alive? I mean, do you know?
I think he died a couple years ago.
Yeah, well, that'll be one. But I mean, you know, it has that. It's that vibe. It's that like, you don't know that Dune means as much to you until like somebody throws it in your face and you go, oh no, Dune, that's my Dune. That's my book.
Yeah, exactly.
You read yourself into that book in some sort of like incredible way.
Absolutely. And it's interesting for me, the book I compare it to the most is not another science fiction, hard sci-fi space opera thing. I actually compare it like in my head. It goes in the same library shelf as Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Yeah.
I don't know why exactly, but that's where it fits to me.
No, it feels that way. It's a book about growing up,
right? For sure,
it's a book about being a man.
Yeah,
and it's what he was trying to do was compress manhood into a 300-page science fiction novel.
Right?
How do we
off?
Yeah, and he did it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and in English, and it's a great American novel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And there's also a bit of there's the whole punk rock middle finger to like, if you don't think that science fiction can do this, we're allow me to explain what this is. Right.
Yeah. Every year there are dozens and dozens of sort of literary fiction or mainstream fiction that are published that don't have anywhere near the heart of Dune. Right.
Yeah. Just the muscle of like just feeling through what he did. Tremendous. And knowing that he's a child of like the 40s and the 50s, it makes sense. It's very punk rock.
And
ahead of its time. And the other episode that you should listen to if you're into Art of Darkness is Gurdjieff. It's actually Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson is.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that book today.
That's he. You know, if Gurdjieff was a better writer,
he might have written something like Dune.
For sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So another just quick note on Bev, because I want us to have this arc, and then we're going to go back to the beginning of Frank's life. 1974. Okay, flash forward. Age of 48. Beverly is diagnosed with lung cancer. She does survive this, even though she was at one point given a terminal diagnosis. She's given a series of, intense treatments. And because it's sort of rudimentary still in 1974, at least compared to now, she beats the cancer, but takes quite a bit of damage to her heart in the process. She lives for another 10 years, but then dies at the age of 57 after like a long gradual decline, right? So she dies by our standards, and by those standards, she dies quite young. She had a prediction that she would die in a faraway land. And she did. She died in Hawaii. They built this crazy compound out in Hana, Hawaii, because he'd been successful for a while before this, but it hadn't always been that way. I want to read one quick thing that Frank wrote, and this will close the sort of focus on Beverly. This is after she passed, in a dedication to Beverly that it was in, I believe it was in Chapter House Dune. It was like in the foreword to Chapter House Dune or the afterword or something. And he wrote this about Beverly. And then we'll move on to Frank Herbert's origin story with this all in the back of our mind. In her final days, she, Beverly, did not want anyone but me to touch her. But our married life had created such a bond of love and trust, she often said the things I did for her were as though she did them. Though I had to provide the most intimate care, the care you would give an infant, she did not feel offended, nor that her dignity had been assaulted. When I picked her up in my arms to make her more comfortable or bathe her, Bev's arms always went around my shoulders, and her face nestled as it often had in the hollow of my neck. Is it any wonder that I look back on our years together with a happiness transcending anything words can describe? Is it any wonder I do not want or need to forget one moment of it? Most others merely touched her life at the periphery. I shared it in the most intimate ways, and everything she did strengthened me. It would not have been possible for me to do what was what necessity demanded of me during the final 10 years of her life, strengthening her in return, had she not given of herself in the preceding years, holding back nothing. I consider that to be my great good fortune and most miraculous privilege. So anyway, I just felt like I needed to tell the Beverly story. She seemed like an amazing woman. Frank was obviously deeply in love with her till the last. And it was 10 years of gradual decline, right? You start with a scare that she's going to die of cancer. She gets over that. Oh no, your heart's no good. And then it's just a slow decline over the course of a decade, where he's also at the pinnacle of writer success at the same time, right? So
yeah.
So when you think about the fact that he sells 20 million books, at the same time, you got to think about this is a man who is watching the love of his life slowly die young. So there's
a deepness of feeling, and you're with someone like Frank Herbert. The reason we don't talk about him too much is that he did the job.
Yeah.
There's no ambivalence of what he did.
Right.
Mamet says about Bach, he says he committed so few crimes. Spiritual crimes,
right?
So it's like it's with Frank Herbert. You're dealing with someone like you're just trying to cope with greatness. Yeah. So it does not surprise me at all that he had that amazing depth of feeling.
Yeah, for sure. And he met the right woman for it, and
he got lucky. He got lucky. And you're right.
Did.
I actually appreciate you foregrounding that, because we've missed out on a lot of Franks because fate doesn't.
Yeah. Took him the wrong way, and he got lucky. He wasn't lucky in everything, but he was lucky with that for sure. Yeah. So now we'll kind of shift, and Beverly obviously is going to come up in the rest of the bio, but I wanted that to be there, and we'll shift to Frank as a boy. So Frank is born 1920, Tacoma, Washington, to Frank Sr. And Babe Herbert. Apparently,
hang on. 1920, Tacoma, Washington.
Yeah,
this is the frontier.
Oh,
you're the edge of the world.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think his pedigree, if you want to call it that, is a little bit interesting. Frank's father had mostly grown up in what was called Burleigh Colony in Washington, State. Frank didn't grow up there, but this was a commune that was started by the SDA, the Social Democrats Association or whatever. A splinter group from the SDA called the Cooperative Brotherhood. And this was like a literal commune. It was a commune out in the woods.
Yep.
And what they did was they rolled cigars. They brought in tobacco from Kentucky and rolled cigars and sold them. And they also they had like a factory for like preserved foods and pickles and ketchup and things like that. And it was a fairly functional commune, I guess you would call it. Now, when Frank Jr., our Frank, came along, his parents had already moved out of Tacoma, but he had a lot of extended family that was still in the colony. So his childhood, in part, was going to this colony to visit, grandma or his uncle or whatever. So he kind of saw that this somewhat harmonious thing. His father would have a string of very working class jobs, including what was he? It was a bus driver. He sold electrical equipment, which I don't even know what that would have been in the 1920s. He was a car salesman, and then his most stable job was he was a motorcycle patrolman for Washington State Police.
I love doing this show because for a variety of it's super cool. You think about Virginia Woolf, and then you think about like this guy, and like you're light years different.
And it does make you realize it's like nothing's really fair and nothing's really democratic.
Nope.
Nothing's really meritocratic, really.
Nope.
But art gets kind of close in some ways, right? A little bit. It gets closer than some other things.
Yeah,
at least
he wrote a better book than Virginia. He did.
Yeah, I mean,
I love Virginia Woolf. I mean, it's not. I'm not. Yeah, but they're in heaven. They're equals.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. And then humble beginnings and not so humble beginnings. Also, just continuing on the kind of the pedigree context thing here. Babe, Frank's mother, was pure Irish. Irish Catholic, one of 13 children, mostly
the one
girls.
True faith.
Yeah, that's right. And she actually claimed to be in the direct line of Irish royal succession, apparently. So Frank Herbert is like Irish royalty, basically.
Oh, is he? Well, that makes perfect sense.
Right.
God,
right.
Dune is super Catholic.
Oh yeah.
Let's be real. Yeah. I mean, about sorry, prots. I mean, let's.
Well, as we said on Twitter, you guys got Star Wars. That's fine. That's a good movie too.
Nerds.
Now, as may not be a surprise, Frank was a gifted kid. I don't think you're going to hear me say, "Oh, he was a dullard." He would claim later, and he didn't boast about this. It was just something he said, that when he was tested for his IQ when he was a kid, that he scored a 190. But he also said on his IQ,
he must have been a verbal genius.
That was the one thing he said, was like, well, it leans a little hard to verbal, and I don't really know what it means anyway. So whatever.
Hang on. I'm Washington State in the 20s.
Right.
30s to 40s.
Out in the woods.
Yeah. The owls are not what they seem.
Right.
We're talking about he must have been, and it's the Catholicism, and he was raised probably with the Bible. One,
and this is a good point to note, just still talking about family and things. His mother had 12 siblings, most of them women. They were very hardline Catholic, and were constantly talking about religion in his youth and pressing it on him. And this is actually where the whole idea of the Ben Gesserit came. Was Jesuit, right? It's right there. And then also he took the mentats from his grandmother. The sort of the germ, the idea was his grandmother, who was apparently like impressive at mental calculation. She was one of these people who could multiply 37 by 112 and do it in a few seconds. So he got that germ of that idea from his grandmother, who was probably just a woman who just made dough and gardened. You know what I mean? She wasn't. They weren't. They weren't. It wasn't. And this is not a dismissal. It wasn't a family of college professors,
right?
And things like that.
Well, this is that thing that happens on Twitter or whatever, on the Bird website, where everybody's like, "I'm a first generation, college student." It's like, well, you're good for you.
Yeah.
What are you even talking about? You're all waking up from history. I mean, welcome to the party.
Right.
My mom was 10 of 11. So, I mean,
wow.
Dude. Yeah. That's it. Let's go.
Yeah. So living out in the middle of the woods, basically, they were pretty close to nature. And so Frank Sr. taught our Frank all the woodsman kind of stuff: hunting, fishing, trapping, camping, backpacking. Taught him all of those things, right? This was something that they shared together. Now you take this, combine the fact that he has this knowledge about the wilderness, loves the outdoors, and that his parents, as time went on, became more and more alcoholics, to be frank. You got a precocious kid with a lot of time on his hands. He would go on these crazy, when he was young, he would go on these crazy rowboat trips. He got himself a rowboat somehow. And once, when he was 10 years old, he took a 200-mile round trip up the Puget Sound to the San Juan Islands alone in a rowboat. He would row out to tugboats and latch on at times, and they would pull him along. Right, 10 years old, all by himself. He also, when he was having these adventures, he befriended this older Native American guy who was a member of some coastal. They said Salish, but I'd never heard of that. I think that's the name of the tribe. Anyway, this guy would teach Frank all kinds of native ways of doing things, of making a hook, of tracking an animal and those sorts of things. So he had a pretty rich, deep experience.
I see what you're doing here. Yeah, I see what you see. I see what you're doing, Brad.
Yeah. Well, hey,
how that's the whole show.
And then another big thing happens in his childhood. At 8 years old, he tells his family that he's going to be a writer. Right?
8?
Which is 8 years old.
At 8? Yeah.
At 8 years old, he tells them that he's going to be a writer.
Oh, man.
Yeah,
Frank.
Right? Yeah, his dad must have just been like, yeah.
Yeah,
all right. So at some point, Frank Sr. quits his job as a state patrolman, which must have been a cool job. He's riding a motorcycle out in, like, he would ride to the base of Mount Rainier, I guess. That was his route.
That's beautiful out there. I mean, do you know that part of the country?
Yeah, I've been out there a number of times.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah.
So you imagine your job is just some motorcycle patrolman just riding your motorcycle.
Friend of the show, Blauergeist. He's out there.
Yeah, I lived out in Idaho and had a job out there.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
So anyway, he quits his job, and what he and his wife and some of their friends do is they open a speakeasy. Because this is like
you do
towards the tail end of Prohibition. So he goes from being a cop to being a part owner of a speakeasy. They would eventually have a falling out with their partners and get kind of ousted out of the speakeasy, but it would go on to become one of like the biggest dance halls in the region, called the Spanish Castle. And his father always hated himself for having screwed up the opportunity.
Oh, really? Oh, man.
So that just made the alcoholism get worse, right? I quit for this opportunity, now it's
I missed Floki.
My friends are rich. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, in high school, continuing on with this, early life, pre-Bev life, Frank isn't that great in high school. Smart kid, obviously. You see this time and time again. If it's not his interest, he doesn't care. He's just lucky that he's interested in a lot of stuff. Right?
I am Frank Herbert.
I'm quite a bit like that.
It's actually like, I'm not Frank Herbert, but I relate to this guy.
Yep. If I'm into it, I can focus. I don't need any encouragement, but if I'm not, it takes willpower. Yeah. He does start to do a little bit better in school. Oh, he runs away at 17 and goes and lives in Salem, Oregon. He's too alcoholic at his house. He goes and lives with some relatives at 17. Things stabilize a little bit in his life, and so he's able to kind of he gets a little bit enthusiastic in high school right at the end, because he gets involved in the newspaper, and he realizes this is something that he likes doing. He's a writer. This is the newspaper. I can get stuff in front of people. I can take photos. He was also quite into photography. And at 17, he actually publishes his first piece of fiction. Doesn't have anything to do with the high school. It's in did I write it down? Anyway, it's in a, I believe, a Western magazine that features Western stories and articles. And there's a really interesting process to how he did it. And I think this tells us a lot about his approach. The fact, the left-brained aspect of his approach. He decided he'd said he was going to be a writer at 8. Sometime around the age 16, he buys boxes of Western magazines and books, reads all of them, and comes up with a formula. Like, this is what you do to write a story, and it will get published. Sure enough, he writes this story. It's a Western, and it gets published, right? Sure. Yeah, so he's figuring out, like,
right. He
put himself through like a genre MFA when he was like 16.
The thing about this is that, like, he arrived at feeling through the kind of the back door. Like, I think a lot of people, when they write because they must.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think like he discovered the emotion in writing through the other direction.
Yeah. I think that's
fair to say?
Yeah.
Like, do you understand what I mean? Insight. Like, he's,
Yeah. You learn the mechanics, you learn that, like, and then eventually through a combination of writing and life experience, eventually you start putting something real down.
Yeah.
Something, maybe real is not the right word, but something with heart.
You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. it's not easy to get there. That's the part
not.
that can't really be taught either, right? Like, yeah.
There will be a day where you are crying at the keyboard.
Yeah.
If you're a real writer.
I agree. Yeah. Been there. We're going to get out of high school here in a second, but there's one other note I want to put down. So Frank is fairly left-brained. He's fairly mechanically inclined. Obviously, he's also verbally gifted. But at this time in his life, he seems a little bit more like a STEM kid than he does.
This is what I'm talking about. This is what I mean. It's like he's deconstructing. Yeah, there's a certain amount of like, no, I'm not throwing any shade, but like a certain amount of autism. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now, there was one exception to this that I thought was interesting because I want to touch on the spooky kind of ethereal qualities and things he was interested in as well. That sort of complement this. So Kevin, do you know about? You might not know the name, but do you know about Rhine cards?
Rhine cards? What?
Rhine, Rhine. So. Remember in Ghostbusters, the first Ghostbusters, where they're reading the
there's only Ghostbusters.
Well, yeah,
by the way,
there's Ghostbusters too.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, I do know Ghostbusters. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know the psychic cards, right? They have
of course the
shape on it. You're supposed to guess them, right?
Yeah.
This was a big thing. There was like a somewhat of a subculture. There's always been a subculture of the occult.
We're always hovering around this. And by the way, the mayor in Ghostbusters read one of my plays.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah. He passed away not long after. Yeah, rest in peace. Yeah. Great actor.
So Rhine cards are a thing. Psychic. The phenomena of being a psychic.
Rhine cards. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He goes on a date. This isn't Beverly. This isn't his first wife. This is just in high school. He goes on a date with this woman who is very interested in this stuff. They decide that they're going to do a psychic reading with just playing cards, right? Because whatever, it doesn't matter what the card's on the card.
We're trying to fuck.
Yeah, exactly. But on this one night, apparently, this girl's pulling cards up, and what you do is the reader looks at it, and the other person's supposed to guess what it is. This particular night, Frank guessed every single one of them right.
No.
Card after card after card after card.
Frank Herbert seems like that kind of guy. He right? really does. There's something about Frank Herbert that
Now he could never repeat this feat, but you have to imagine imagine that happened to you. Someone poses this little psychic test to you and you just knock it out of the park. It's gonna start some gears grinding, right? Even if it doesn't totally blow out your worldview,
right?
It's gonna be
I know what you're saying.
Happens, always this weird thing that I can't quite explain, right? So that's sort of in there, and I just want to keep. That's another thing I want to.
That's very strange.
Yeah,
that's very strange.
Yeah.
So when was this in the 40s?
This would have been like 1937 or 8.
Man, I'm gonna lay it down. America is a very weird place, man.
It really is.
It's very weird. We're not. I don't know that we are 100% in the real in America. No, I've been thinking about this a lot lately.
Yeah.
No, I think there are some very strange things, man.
Oh yeah.
The owls are not what they seem.
That's a good way of putting it.
That's what I mean. Who knows what it means? I mean, were they stoned? Were they,
Right. Yeah. And then you can't repeat it. So it's almost, because you can't repeat it, it's almost like it isn't real, but it did. If it happened, it is real.
Is this before he met the witch?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're just, everyone in America is looking for a witch. Really?
That's
really?
Right.
I mean, I watched that film, The Witch, recently. That's a banger. That movie is so good, man.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
We're not all this stuff. It's like the mythology of what it means to be an American. You're talking about the dream. It's here. Yeah,
for sure. Excuse me. So 1939, Herbert graduates high school. He becomes a cub reporter for the Glendale Star in California. So he moves to California.
I love that like phrase,
crazy.
Cub reporter.
Oh, it's full of such optimism.
Oh, vim. I'm going to get my blue check.
Right. Exactly. he works. Okay, so he gets his job, Glendale reporter, works real hard, but eventually decides he wants to be back in the Pacific Northwest. Moves to Salem, and then this is great how he gets his job at the Oregon Statesman. It's so funny. He calls them or writes them a letter or something, finds out there's no positions available. So he stalks down the editor of the Oregon Statesman, shows up on the guy's front yard, and sort of just imposes himself on this guy. And it's literally one of those I don't know how I can help you, kid, but you got moxie. It's totally one of those.
You got moments. A lot of vim, kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so Frank gets hired. Hired. Now he's working.
Just show up. In the front yard of the guy who. What is it? The RV salesman.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. So
a lot of stalking.
Yeah, and it worked. It worked for him a couple times. Yeah. Now, 1941, he meets this woman, Flora. Flora is not Beverly. Flora is Frank's first wife. Oh. They elope to a courthouse and get married. Again, get married very, very quickly. Which is fine, except this is literally the same month that Germany attacks Russia, and America is going to be at war any second, and Frank is exactly of the age, right? So, Frank's involvement with World War II. February 15th, he registers of 1942. He registers for the draft. February 16th, his first daughter, Penny, is born. So he has a child when he's 22 years old. And he decides that rather than waiting to get drafted and seeing what happens, that he should enlist in the Navy, and which apparently a lot of people do because they think it's safer.
You've got the Western Front, and you've got. So he actually gets because of his experience on newspapers, he gets the assignment to be a photographer, and he starts in the Norfolk Naval Yard. He never actually sees combat, never goes overseas. He's making some money. He's a veteran. He's maybe not a combat veteran, but he's doing his part. He gets a letter from his wife while he's at the Norfolk Naval Yard that she wants a divorce. This is 1942. They've barely been married at all. And she sends him a note that he wants to get divorced. The story is, and I don't know if this is actually what happened, this is what Brian Herbert says, is he was so sort of dismayed that one night he's out walking around, kind of, moment of, dark night of the soul kind of situation, trips over a tent stake, bashes his head in, and then gets honorably discharged from the military because he's got a hematoma. And he's at risk. If anything strikes his head, he could die, basically. So, in a very short order, married, kid, military, out of the military. He, after World War II, he finds a job at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. Now he's a bachelor. He's got a kid out there someplace. He's living in the spare bedroom of some rich lady's house. This is the guy who's gonna write Dune.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying. Truly, I'm trying to put myself in the head of this guy.
It's bizarre. It's where does it come? Yeah, I was reading this, especially this early stuff, I'm like, where does it come from? Okay, he gets the Ben Gesserit thing from his aunts. Fine, but where does all of it come from?
Did he do acid? That's do you know what I mean? Yeah, well,
I don't know that he did acid. He definitely ate magic mushrooms for sure.
Okay,
yeah,
sure. I don't understand having to explain to normies who there's this certain type of American person who wants to appreciate Dune without talking about tripping.
Right.
You're wrong. It's about tripping. It's 100% about tripping.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry that that's not part of your frame of reference, but
you can't actually deal with that.
But it's you're gonna want to trip mushrooms and watch Dune and okay.
Yeah.
It is. It's about about tripping. It's
for sure
60s counterculture. The dude tripped and wrote it down.
Yes. For people who don't know, one big indication of this is the fact that DMT, the street name for DMT is spice. in a lot of circles. People don't really call it that anymore, but for a while, that's what it was called, the spice. Yeah. And that's literally because of the spice in Dune, right? It's not, all there. Dune is a cornerstone of American.
Yeah, it's not a LARP. It's if you watch David Lynch's Dune and you go, that doesn't make any sense to me. This is crazy. What am I watching? It's like trip a heroic dose of mushrooms and talk to me later.
Yeah, the connections will form. Trust me.
It's all right there. Yeah, and it's not I'm not a braggart. I'm not boasting. Just trip mushrooms.
Yeah. No, it'll all make a lot more sense. No, it's a cornerstone. Dune is the cornerstone of American psychedelic artistic culture for sure.
Yes. And I'm glad that we're just saying it.
Yeah.
It's really important to just No, it is. It's the peak. We're arriving at it through your tale. Go on.
Oh, well, I was going to say this, in American psychedelic culture, there's a lot of music that is easy to point to. There's even a fair number of films that are easy to point to. There's not that many great novels that are easy to point to in that same category. Well, I feel like.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, you're not talking about Dune. Yeah, no, it's essential in terms of, and we don't talk about psychedelic culture enough, do we? Because it kind of got like ripped off by the left. They sort of like took it over and now it's all, but it's.
Well, now it's getting turned into, and this is something we could go on for, but now it's getting turned into, and I realize there's great therapeutic use. That's beautiful. And it's cool to see that there's studies coming out to support that and all that. But it's gradually, I see the shift from a distance getting turned into something
making it like medical.
It's like it's somewhere between, it used to be dangerous and now it's becoming like a vitamin. And it's weird to like,
No, I know
it's
what you're
weird
saying.
to see something's going to get lost in that transition.
Yeah. I'm just going to come out and say, when you're 17, you should trip. Really trip balls and and come back around. My favorite quote about that is from Maynard from Tool. You take the drug so that the drug shows you the top of the mountain so that you can find your way there without the drug. Over the next whatever.
I think
that's it.
I think there's some real truth to
this
that.
guy, I don't know, and I want you to explain to me what happened to Frank Herbert, but like, okay.
He's got a very special relationship. He's maybe more important to the history, not just of psychedelics in America, not just in this book, but in like actual day to day.
The world that we inhabit, with the microphone and the Apple and I've got my my iPhone. None of this exists if it isn't for the acid and the mushrooms and everything. California and what happened. They did ceremonial magic, and now we all inhabit the reality that they concocted, and
for good or ill.
For good or ill. It's not, maybe we could put that genie back in the bottle. Like it would be good if we could go back, but we're not going to go back.
Right.
Yeah. And this guy is like super important. Yes. They all read Dune. Read Dune.
Everybody read Dune. Yeah. Anybody with any whiff of hippiness to them who did anything read Dune. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, he's working at the Seattle Post-Intelligencer. Eventually he gets laid off from that. Right? He gets laid off from that because they're trying to make room for combat veterans. He's not a combat veteran, so he can't work at his job anymore. This is right around the time he gets married to Beverly. So he's going to college mostly because he lost this job. He meets Beverly. He's unemployed. They decide what they're going to do for their honeymoon, which is really cool in my opinion, is they go and do fire watch for, I think, a month up on Kelly Butte in Washington, which I don't know if you know about fire watch. And I think they still do it in large national forests. They'll basically be it's sort of like a tree house, but it's a little tent, little structure way up above the trees. And somebody hangs out in there during fire season and they're on the radio and they just watch to see if there's any fires, right? It's one of these things that people you get paid very, very little to do it, but it's like people would go and do it as like almost like a vacation, right?
No, I like this. I mean, okay. Keep building the story. So it's so interesting because it's
This is their honeymoon. So this is he and Beverly's honeymoon is a month just living out in the wilderness together, and it's covered and there's food drops and that kind of thing. And because they got together so quickly, this is really how their relationship really comes together. You know, before they got married, it'd been, you know, some small number of dates or whatever. And this is together. Brian, their first son, is conceived on this trip, and all of that. I mean, it's just kind of a beautiful moment.
Getting it done.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That's right.
Frank Herbert.
Yeah. So let's talk about Frank for a minute, because now he's an adult in our story. So I want to like paint you. I want you to be able to see him too.
Does he have a beard? Does he have a big fat beard?
Yeah. I'll show you real quick.
I'm vibing.
I don't know how well you can see that.
Yeah. He is a neck beard, a Reddit neck beard.
Yeah. So just so you could picture him, he was like 5'10", kind of lean. His son Brian keeps describing him as burly, but he only weighed 150 pounds when he was in the Navy. So I don't know how burly you can be at 5'10", 150.
Call him Dr. Freud.
Again, this is a little bit of hero worship on his son's part, probably.
My dad wrote Dune.
Yeah, that's all you got to say. He could have lacked in every other category.
My dad wrote Dune.
Yeah. He's an adventurous guy, sort of scattered in some ways, but, you know, he's adventurous physically and in ideas, obviously. For instance, he liked to drive extremely fast and would take risks while he was driving. People didn't like to drive with him because of how fast he drove.
Oh, no.
He's very gregarious.
Like
no, it's not good.
No, I don't
He's a very gregarious guy and a good talker, but so much so that anytime he was in a conversation, it ended up being about him. It ended up being about his stories.
Was he an only child?
What he was going to do. No, he had, I believe he had a younger brother, and he might have had a younger sister.
But he was the oldest.
He was the oldest, yeah. And there was a big gap between he and his brother.
Sure.
A 6-year gap between him.
I mean, you know, I think we're like autism, like super powerful, like, you know, just intense.
Yeah, and a high octane kind of genius.
Super genius. Yeah. Try and keep up with me. Why are you not following along? Right, I'm telling you about the Bene Gesserit. What do you? Yeah. There are these space switches.
Yeah. Yes.
I have a story to tell you about the space switches.
Yeah. Right.
Like
right.
what?
And part of and this ties exactly into the thing I want to talk about next. So because he's sort of like this and he's obsessed with writing, he's super defensive about his writing time and making sure it's a priority, and he's willing to sacrifice all kinds of other things so he can write. He's not good with kids.
The guy who wrote Dune is not good with kids.
Right. He's impatient with them. He did this thing where he kind of assumed that the kids should already know what to do, kind of thing. And there's another problem too. So Frank is obsessed with all kinds of ideas. He was very into Freud. He was very into Jung. There's something I got to tell you about one thing that he did with his kids that kind of messed with my head a little bit. So he had Brian who wrote Dreamer of Dune, but also continued the Dune series after Frank's passing. He had Penny from his first marriage, who he eventually had a decent relationship with. And then he had Bruce, who we're going to talk about more, who he was effectively estranged from throughout Bruce's later years. But this is sort of what it was kind of like to be a son of Frank Herbert. This is from Brian Herbert. Dad was, by his own admission, a man obsessed with, quote, turning over stones to see what would scurry out, with unmasking lies. This was evident in his dealings with his children. He had a World War II lie detector, a U.S. Navy unit, a small black box with a dial. It had ominous wires and a gray cuff that he wrapped tightly around my arm. The first time he used the machine on me, he accused me of secretly hitting my brother, and he was going to get the truth out of me. He said the lie detector always revealed falsehood, which was not, as I would learn later, exactly the case. Admittedly, I was lying about hitting my brother, and the machine indicated this, so I got a licking. After that, he used the lie detector on me regularly and on Bruce. If anything came up, such as an item missing from his desk or questions about where I had been after school, he would say in a clipped voice, "I'm putting you on the lie detector. Let's go in the other room." With that, he would grab my arm and lead me to the machine. On the way, I broke out into sweat, rehearsing what I would say and how I would say it. Would he ask such and such? My mind was a whirl, full of terror. The machine was kept in his study, and he only brought it out when I was in trouble. It was set up on a wooden table with 2 straight-back chairs pulled up to it, one on each side. He pointed to one of the chairs, and I slipped into it, shaking. Towering over me, he plugged the machine in and tapped it a couple of times for effect, ostensibly to free a sticky needle. A bare ceiling bulb threw his hulking shadow across the table. "Roll up your left sleeve," he said gruffly. Shaking, I complied, and he wrapped the sensor cuff around my arm. A stream of questions and accusatory statements ensued from him, and like a prisoner undergoing the tortures of Grand Inquisitor, perspiration poured from my brow. Dad was too smart and phrased every query in the precise way that put me in the worst possible light. After each question, he studied the machine intently and invariably pronounced me guilty of something. According to Howie Hansen, Frank's friend, who disapproved of the use of the device on Bruce and me, Dad had a way of rigging the machine to indicate that we were lying, even when we were telling the truth. So that's pretty intense. I feel like it's a pretty
don't abuse your
thing.
Kids, people.
Yeah,
like really. Yeah. Don't hate.
Yeah,
your kids.
and this is the art of darkness, so we got to find. Everybody's a complicated, problematic figure in some way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so this is one of the things about Frank that maybe isn't the best, isn't the best quality to have.
Yeah, but
it's there.
Yeah.
And I also can't help but see the allusion to the Gom Jabbar scene in Dune a little bit, right? There's a little bit of the test, a little bit of the we're going to put you under pressure kind of thing. It's all sort of right there.
What is that? Is the Gom Jabbar? Is that what that is?
The Gom Jabbar is the poison. The
needle. The needle.
Yeah, the box that is just the box. But the word Gom Jabbar is so cool sounding.
No, it's dynamite. Yeah. It's and when you're thinking about someone like Frank Herbert, and you're thinking about someone who was born in the 20s. What year was he born?
1920.
20. Yeah. They are so close they were relative to the way that we live now. They were so close to nature.
Oh yeah.
They were the butcher down the block would kill the hog.
Right.
And that was what you were eating. And you would know the hog's name.
Yeah.
You were not that removed. And they were just harder. I mean, they were harder.
And you got to think, okay, so yeah, Frank puts his kids on a lie detector, and it's kind of screwed. It's screwed up. I don't think you should do that. But at the same time, a lot of the men that were born at the exact same time as Frank beat the crap out of their kids.
Yeah.
Right. And it was much more sort of how things were done. And
that
Frank
was just how it was.
That, right. So,
right.
So
they would beat the crap out of the sons and then do worse things to the daughter. It was like not a good. We're all so very close from like degrees of like sadism that are just like just read Freud.
Right.
It's like we're not anyway that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah.
Art of Darkness, artofdarkpod.com.
Right.
Support the show at the Patreon.
Hey man, it took me a while. It was I had to find that.
Yeah.
That's not the first thing that shows up on Frank Herbert's Wikipedia
No, for sure.
page.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not apologetics for him, but it's like you're also sort of trying to understand like this thing that happens, which is the thing that really is the inciting incident of Dune. Is fear is the mind killer.
Mm-hmm.
The fear is the worst thing. You can endure anything.
Yeah.
It's like it's that metaphor of what's it called? The box.
Yeah, the box. Yeah, the Gom Jabbar scene.
Gom Jabbar. That box is the greatest metaphor for the nuclear warfare. Yeah, it's
interesting.
That's what that is. So it's like how do you make a thing like World War II, like all of the horror of that. How do you personalize that in a way that is Greek, dramatic?
Yeah,
the hand in the box.
All right,
that's
right.
That's what that metaphor is.
Yeah. Take your hand out of the box and you die.
And you die. Yeah.
Oof.
It's perfect. Yeah. And it's so this is so what I'm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's So, anyway, that was talking a little bit about the childhood stuff. Frank. Until Frank made money as a writer, he and Beverly were bohemian. I mean, in serious ways, right? So they get married in 1946. This is really before the hippie movement. I mean, they're old hippies. They're old for hippies, for sure.
This is the thing. It's like the Pacific Northwest has always been like ahead of Nirvana and Hendrix.
Right. Yeah,
man.
Yeah. So, he would have a ton of different jobs. They would live all over the place and not, they didn't live in New York or anything, but they lived in Mexico on 2 different occasions in 2 different locations in Mexico. They lived in California and Oregon and Washington and constantly bouncing between all of them. They lived in Hawaii. They were sort of always one step ahead of their debts. Including the IRS. Frank also was not paying child support payments for years, and one reason he constantly changed addresses was so that his ex-wife couldn't find him.
Frank.
And then eventually she would find him, and then but there was never really much money. And the one thing I really kind of respect about him, but he also was almost suspenseful in learning about his biography, is just how unintimidated by debt he was. Just like, okay, so what? We owe them a bunch of money. Like, it didn't really it didn't sink into him. There's that. Something power. There's a bit of a superpower to that.
Yeah.
So, let's see. So the one thing. So here's another thing that kind of indicates sort of how bohemian they were. One time when they lived, the second time they lived in Mexico. The first time they moved down there with this other science fiction writer, Jack Vance, who was really famous at his time, and they became kind of friends and were going to work on a project together. But the second time they moved to Mexico, because money was tight for a car, they had bought a hearse. They had bought a hearse that had been put out of commission. And this hearse, on the side of it, had... they kept calling it chapel doors. Brian in the biography keeps calling it chapel doors. And I eventually looked it up. The side of the hearse was like the front of a Gothic cathedral in miniature. Like, it's hard to even visualize, but it looked like the side of a church on the side of this car. And this was their daily driver. Right. And at one point they painted the hood yellow. They had the back of the hearse.
They were hippies.
Oh, totally.
Big time.
They're just driving this thing all over Mexico. They had a platform in the back they had made out of plywood so that you could store all your stuff under, and the kids would sit up on top while they were driving around. It's just a wild scene. So anyway, that's a kind of a picture of how they rolled. They're definitely bohemians.
I like this. And he's like, I am dreaming of the greatest space novel.
Yeah. And it's built, it's always, it's built in his head all the time.
That's a vibe. Yeah. I mean, he's definitely a Reddit guy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's a Reddit guy.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So we're going to get into the writing a little bit more here, because he starts to be more and more of a writer. But first I want to ask you, Kevin, just because I think it'll be fun to guess, how many books do you think Frank Herbert wrote?
How many books did he write? A dozen?
Yeah, that's close.
Yeah, about right.
He wrote, in addition to Dune, he wrote the Dune series, which is 6 novels. He wrote 15 novels.
Yeah.
Right. So cranking them out. Yeah. Very difficult for him to get them published until Dune was published.
Can you imagine Dune comes across your transom? You're an editor in New York City.
Yeah.
You are.
Yeah.
It's a Tuesday.
Yeah.
And,
this phone book sized manuscript comes
and you're
in.
right. And you're I'm going to enjoy this. I'm really going to savor this.
Okay.
And you're what would you call him? The guy who does coverage for you.
Yeah.
Sends this up to your desk and says, I don't know. I think maybe we have something here. What is this? And you're just like, well, how does Dune begin? Like, how does it even start? You're like, this guy's a lunatic.
Right.
You have to, what is he? He's like, I'm from Washington State.
Right.
Like, well, I've been living in Mexico.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With in my hearse.
Yeah.
Right.
No college degree.
No degree.
Pedigree,
No pedigree. But this sci-fi. Yeah. Was he published?
Yeah.
Before?
Yeah. So he had published, and we'll talk about this a little bit. He had published a number of times. There were a handful of pretty popular science fiction magazines at that time. Astounding Tales, Astonishing Science Fiction, these kind of pulp things were out there. And so Frank was able to, from time to time,
so he was in these. So when he dumped the novel on your desk, it's like, okay, can you even imagine?
It's crazy. And we're gonna talk about it.
It makes me happy.
It's great because
I love it.
It's like it was so good. The weight of it, it had to end up where it ended up. Right? Yeah. It couldn't just live in a desk. His first book he gets published, though, it ended up going by a bunch of names. We're going to call it The Dragon in the Sea. It's essentially an underseas adventure, but it's got like ecological and Cold War overtones. It's basically about fighting over underwater oil reserves that they're mining with submarines.
I don't think that normies appreciate that. Like he's operating on a level of metaphor.
Yeah,
that's like he's playing 5D chess.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's about everything.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And Dragon in the Sea was actually pretty well received. I mean, he was kind of considered a rising star in science fiction, right? So,
okay. Was it a novel or a novella?
It was a novel. It had been published it had been serialized in the magazines first, and then it was put out as a novel.
Okay.
But it didn't.
So he wasn't like an unknown.
Not entirely, but after Dragon in the Sea, like that was kind of it for years.
Like in the 50s, he wrote that?
Yeah. I think it was 1952 or 55. I don't have it but it was around then.
It just makes me so happy. I'm trying to like think about like the guy who drops Dune on your desk.
Right. And it's just sort of like, you got to deal with this. We all have to deal with this now.
Whoops. Like you have to. The thing about publishing and the world of art is that it's very brittle and very angry. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, you can probably pick up on a bit of it if you listen to Art of Darkness. But there's a lot of menace in it, and like nobody wants to acknowledge genius. And then suddenly you're in New York City, you're having your coffee, you've had your third cigarette of the day. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And, you're going through a divorce, you're a publisher. Right. And suddenly someone from nowhere throws that book.
Right.
And you have to like cope.
Right. Oh, like for sure.
Just because truly.
I think, and I'm not in the position of being an editor or doing, coverage or any of this, but like, I think a lot of the people who do that are in some way failed writers. Now, whether they failed sort of when they were 12 and they gave up on it, or when they failed as adults, some part of them, maybe not failures, but some part of them wants to be doing this, what they're actually reading. And I think because of that, respect has always got to be very difficult to earn. It's always like this isn't that good kind of thing, right? Yeah. Right? Because there is a little bit of resentment. There almost has to be, I think.
Yeah, of course. I mean, because you if you're the one reading it, you're the one judging.
Right.
So you put yourself in a position where if someone throws like the next stranger or whatever it is, or throws, no exit on your desk, you're in a position to judge.
Right.
I'm just trying to imagine what it's like in the early 60s Is that when it was published?
1965.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. It's like somebody, see, the Beatles announced themselves. Like the Beatles said, hey, we're the Beatles. They did Revolver. Yeah. Right. And then you were kind of ready for the next, you know what I mean? Like this guy just sends you Dune.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Right.
I can't. And you're just like, and suddenly like the Whisper Network.
Oh yeah.
Like in New York, it's like, this is because they're all tripping. They're all tripping balls. They're all tripping. They are.
Yeah.
At that time, they're all doing acid. They're all doing, mushrooms. They're all trying to figure out like what is going on. They're listening to the Beatles. Right. It's like, what is the thing that is the American, like Dune is the American answer to the Beatles.
Interesting.
It is. It is.
All right, I get a gestate on that for a while.
Yeah,
it sort of intuitively makes sense.
No, it's the I just said it. No, it's amazing. It must be. No, but it is. It is. Yeah. It's psychedelic, and it's like there's. Ugh. What did I say earlier? Don't make me explain Dune to you.
We're gonna get there. Because I want to tell the story.
You bring it around.
Dune got published, but we're not quite there yet.
All right.
Okay. So he wrote The Dragon in the Sea, and it did fairly well. He made a little bit of money on it, but not enough to quit, normie jobs, right? But enough to be, you're 30-ish and like you got a novel published and people like it. That means a lot, right? But he has to keep working. And another thing, other than journalism, his other sort of wing of his normie career was working in politics as a speechwriter. He worked for a number of candidates on their campaigns, but his biggest one was working for Republican Senator Guy Cordon. Guy Cordon was like this old school senator, like impossible to bribe. He was part of like the obsolete Republican Party at this time. Like the Republican Party is in politics in general, and we're not going to go too deep into it. It's undergoing a change into the 50s and the 60s. And Guy Cordon is part of like that pre-World War II kind of mentality a little bit, right? But Frank really believes in him. He respects the man a lot. Frank not only is a speechwriter, but ends up being sort of his key PR man. And here's one thing that's important. So Frank actually goes to work in Washington, D.C., leaves the family behind and goes to work in Washington, D.C. for a while. And here's where we get a little bit more of where Frank picks up some of the stuff for Dune. Cordon chaired the Interior and Insular Affairs Committee and also served on various other committees related to energy, right? So Frank got to see the sort of the insides of how are these decisions getting made about resources and energy and land.
Energy.
Right? Yeah. And also he's seeing the behind the curtain of politics as well. I mean, he meets a young Robert Kennedy. He is there for all the McCarthy stuff. He's in Washington, D.C. Not all, but he's there when that's sort of the thing. He meets Harry Truman, who's, past his career as president, but is still sort of looming around. He's not at the nexus of all this stuff, but he's
leaves his family in Washington and then goes to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Right. So, but at the same time, he's writing through all of this, right? So he just work all day and write all night, and he didn't care. There's no indication of Frank carousing at all. Anywhere.
Really?
Yeah. He had his issues, right? But apparently there was very.
You watch the new film, and it's just it really is pure. It's so there's just it's very, very difficult. No, it is. Like, I did not like it the first time that I watched it.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I was looking forward to talking to you about it because I loved it, but I also didn't think it was. To me, it was like, well, nobody's ever going to make it exactly right, and what would that even mean? And this seems like about as good as you're ever going to get. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah,
and I enjoyed it as an experience.
Yeah, no, for me, the first time I watched it, I did not like it. It was too intense.
Yeah.
Do you know? And then watching it again, it's I'm gonna have to watch it like 5 more times.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it.
Which is about as good as it gets.
That's a huge commendation, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's what I want. I mean, it's incredible. Yeah, I don't. there's Western civilization is falling apart.
Yes.
Around us.
Yes.
And we need Dune right now.
I think
it's extremely important.
It's the closest thing, and this is irrespective of the contents of it, it's the closest thing we've had to a monocultural event in years. That everybody went and saw.
The dudes need Dune right now.
Yes.
The bros need Dune.
Right. And then you take that and you put the content with it, it works. We
need to do this Art of Darkness episode about Dune right now. It's really important.
Yes.
Really. It is. Like it is. It is actually, it means a lot to me. It's not, I'm not boasting. It's just, it means a lot. There will always be a new generation of bros who want to talk about Dune.
Yes.
And if you are a Dune bro, like you're at least interested in ideas.
Yeah, that's sure, right?
Super important. Yeah. So and now that you're going into it, it's like, it makes sense.
Yeah. You start to see where the pieces are all coming from, right? And I thought this period where he was working sort of in politics was really interesting because the politics in Dune are fascinating. The maneuvering, the strategy, the machinations, all the chess, the chess that's being played between the different families, and you start to think that, okay, he was starting to see what are the motives that are stated, and what are what are the second layer down motives, and then what are the third layer motives, and then what do you go below that where there's groups who've been trying to maneuver things for generations, and what are they trying to do, and just seeing how all of that kind of fits together. I think he got a glimpse of that in Washington, D.C., and he obviously extrapolated it and turned it into his own thing. But he's working for this guy, Corden, and Corden loses his next campaign because, again, he's part of the old guard. The new guard's kind of moving in. So now Frank he's out of work. This is when they actually, this is when they do their second trip to Mexico. Now, this is kind of what's interesting. So that dragon story, the dragon in the sea, what did I call it? Dragon of the heart, the dragon in the sea. It was actually pretty successful, made him some money, was kind of popular, got decent reviews, including a good review in the New York Times. His next book.
The paper of record.
That's right. His next book, which is not Dune, he can't get anybody to publish it. Nobody will publish it. Now, the question might be all right, well, why didn't it get published? Because in my head, you get a good review, somebody should give you a shot, right? But here's the thing about Frank. Though he did that thing where he read all those Western books and came up with the formula, later on, he couldn't constrain the vision. So he would write things, almost everything he wrote after The Dragon in the Sea was of an inappropriate length. It was either too long or too short, right? It was the second book he wrote, I think it was called Story Ship. It was too much of a detective novel for the science fiction crowd. And it's too much of a science fiction novel for the detective noir crowd. And it was a little bit on the too preachy side. He hadn't figured out how to integrate the didactic components so they fit into the story.
Yeah,
right?
that thing of that is true in Dune. There's a quality of polemic.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. And it's a little on the nose at times. And
but when he hits the note, it's perfect.
Right. Agreed. Right. Because he eventually figures out how to get it so it's inherent to the story rather than just something somebody spouts off.
Right. And that's the thing where everyone comes to him and says, "Are you trying to start a cult?"
Right.
It's that. Are you?
Yeah.
What do you want from me, Frank?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were and the whole world in the 60s was screaming to be remade.
Oh yeah.
The world wanted to be remade. This guy watch 2 movies to watch right in a row. The Master, Dune.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Oh,
You're dealing with someone who is that level of consciousness.
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, The Master.
Yeah, The Master's a banger.
Okay. So, all right. So they go to Corden. He loses his job with the guy Corden, mostly not because he didn't do a good job, but because Guy Corden is no longer a guy in Washington, D.C. They try to go to Mexico again, and they kind of can't quite get anything off the ground. Frank kind of can't get enough things going money-wise from publishing stories, which was part of the plan of moving to Mexico. It's like, hey, we'll go there. It's beautiful. We'll live cheap. I'll be able to get some stuff published because we'll be able to live cheap. And then, when the career takes off, maybe we can move back to the United States. They run out of money before that happens. And money is, after Guy Corden, the work with Guy Corden, for a while, money is kind of hard to come by. So I'm kind of stressed to you how broke they were at times. And this is this isn't when they're 20-year-old lovebirds. This is when they got 2 kids, bills to pay, child support's hunting him down. He owes money to the IRS, right? Now, he did have jobs, but let's talk about a little bit, a couple of the tricks he would do. This is the level of poverty they had at times. Now, it's not the poorest people ever, and probably not even the poorest person we've talked about on this podcast, but they would have to do things like, and Frank had all these tricks. One trick was he would sign up for every mailing list he could, so he would get as much junk mail as possible so that he could compress the junk mail into like fire logs that they could burn in the stove. Right.
Patreon.com/Art of Dark Pod.
Yeah. I mean, yes.
Yeah. That's no good.
Yeah. I don't want to be right. That's pretty broke.
That's pretty broke. Yeah,
they would celebrate Christmas on January 6th. Frank would call it, well, we celebrated on the Feast of Epiphany, which is January 6th. But the real reason that they did it is because they would buy all of their Christmas gifts for their children during cleaseout, clearance sales right after Christmas, right? So it was difficult to come by money, and they were in quite a lot of debt, right?
Well, it's probably because he was a schizo Redditor. He probably was unbearable.
In a lot of ways, I think he probably was. Yeah, I think that's probably true.
I like him. I want him to win. I want him to write Dune. Right. But it's also like you can sort of see how the guy who wrote Dune was a problem.
Yes. Yeah, no, I agree. And Brian would kind of say this about him. His son would kind of say this about him. He was a little bit much. He's sort of like, conversations always ended up being about him.
Right.
And he was competitive, not competitive in like sports and things necessarily, but like he always wanted everybody to know that he knew more than anybody else in the room about whatever they were talking about, right? It's that kind of thing. And he had the encyclopedic kind of like, oh, we're gonna have a glass of wine, and then he would go off for 45 minutes about the various vintages, and he's one of those kind of dudes. Which could be tiresome for sure.
Yeah, it's exhausting.
yeah.
Dune, the podcast,
right? Now the 50s are kind of broke, right? And there's a period of precariousness, but there's something that happens. And I read to try and figure out what exactly was the shift. And I don't know that there was a discrete point, but at some point in the late 50s, Frank learns how to write for real. Like he learns how to transcend pulp. Because that's what he'd been operating.
Well, that's the thing about Dune is that you pick it up and you're reading literature,
right?
But it's literature that's steeped in the pulp, like you're saying.
Yeah. All the imagery from it is pulp. All of the like the high level 30,000 foot view of like a scene is pulp, but it's going deeper than that. Somewhere in the late 50s, he learned something after all these hours of years at the keyboard of trying to crank out stuff that mostly people weren't all that interested in, with a few exceptions. So let's talk about like where he got the ideas for Dune. So we talked about the Ben Gesserit thing with his Catholic aunts, Jesuit. We talked about the political maneuverings in Washington, D.C. that he got to see firsthand.
It's so perfect. I'm sorry. It's just like, as an American Catholic, it's so perfect.
Oh yeah. And a lot of it is right. It's definitely a Catholic novel for sure. But here's one thing that he was able to do. This is part of the reason he was able to do world building so well. He was a fairly mechanically inclined guy, and so there's two interesting things about the submarine novel, which I didn't read, but are interesting to tell you more about what Frank is like. One is Frank actually like built a mini submersible, not to go into, but like something that he could like sink and kind of play with to understand how it would work, right? So he did it like in a bathtub or something like this. The idea, he came up with this idea just for the sake of the book about a flexible barge, so that when you fill it up with fill it up with oil, it's not some huge tanker thing. You fill up a tube, a really long tube, and you drag it underwater. And then when it's empty, you can just roll it up and put it on the deck. This was actually turned into a real thing that's in use now by a British company and they sell it to oil refiner, like deep sea oil platforms. Frank invents this in a book when he's like 28 years old, right? This technology that is later actually put into use, right? So he comes up with like things that actually work, and this is where you see in Dune the still suits, and he's able to see the problem and then see what the solution is to it, and then see what that solution's implications are for what it's like to live in that, right? He can see all those levels.
Yeah, he's an American.
Yeah,
he's an American. He's a practical.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I just think it's kind of brilliant. There's almost like a Da Vinci quality to him in a certain sense, right?
Yeah.
And Da Vinci was another kind of genius. There's something about like, the ornithopter thing. Like, wow, we got to figure out a way to make a thing that the dust can't mess, like, and then understanding all of the implications of that. So now, but here's the big thing that is the big Dune. Okay, so another thing, he's also super interested in psychological theories, philosophies, and religions, right? He's very well read.
That comes across like in the books.
Yeah. So he's very interested in this.
He's steeped in like Freud.
He's actually friends with Alan Watts at one point.
Oh, really?
Pre-fame, he's friends with Alan Watts. So he's got these many sources. And what Dune ends up being is he finds a way to finally bring all of it to bear on one thing.
He's so interesting because like he's somebody who could have invented Apple computers.
Right. Yeah.
But he just decided to write a novel.
Right.
He decided that was the approach.
Oh yeah. And then
to get his message across.
In the early 80s, he bought some ridiculous personal computer system that was like a one of a kind thing.
Did he? Yeah. Of course he did. Yeah. He saw. Yeah.
Yeah. So now the question is, all right, so he needs a central idea to create Dune. He needs a central idea to bring it that allows him to spice is definitely one of them. Spice is definitely one of them. But here's the official Brian Herbert story, okay? And remember, the Brian Herbert story is a little bit hero worship, a little sanitized. He just says, well, Frank did peyote once and he didn't like it. And, might have smoked weed one time.
I love, for the record, I've done a lot of drugs. I am big ups on drugs. I'm all about the drugs for real. It's so dumb. All these guys from like the 50s, they're all so cute and coy about maybe I did. No, big ups on drugs.
Yeah. Well, especially
big fan,
especially the psychedelics. Man.
Big fan of drugs.
Clearly, yeah.
Opened my mind.
Yeah. I mean, same here, man. There's no denying that. Okay, so here's the, and we're gonna get to more drug stuff. I promise. Particularly in the Patreon episode, I got something great for us.
Yeah. artofdarkpod.com.
Yes. Yeah. 1957. Herberts are living in Portland, Oregon. Beverly is the breadwinner. Okay. Beverly she's writing copy for a department store. She's actually pretty good at this kind of work, marketing, that sort of thing. Right. So she's the primary breadwinner. Frank decides that he wants to go back to Tacoma. That's where home is. Writing hasn't gone well, right? He's 37. He's got 2 kids. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't really have a good prospect for a job. His writing career has failed so far. He's starting to have a little bit of like a dark night of the soul kind of situation. So he convinces Beverly to go up there. Beverly's down for whatever, right? They go there. She finds a job in the Tacoma area. Great. Now, just before they move, Frank hears this interesting story about a U.S. Department of Agriculture project on the coast of Oregon. And what the USDA apparently has figured out to do here is to limit the the movement of sand dunes on the coast. They have a real problem with these sand dunes getting blown by winds off the ocean and like going over roads and clogging storm drains and generally just screwing with the territory. And they figured out a way to limit this by planting what are called poverty grasses. It's just grasses that will grow in sand, basically. And this prevents the erosion. And it's so successful that people are coming from all over the world. Like people are coming from Israel and like desert countries to see like, okay, is this something we can do, right? This is like kind of revolutionary. Frank hears about it.
USA, baby.
That's right.
All
that's
day.
Right.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
Now, Frank is like, well, this is really interesting. Maybe I can write like a feature-length magazine article about what they're doing with these dune grasses.
What they're doing with the dunes.
What they're doing with the dunes.
Dune.
So he, and this is kind of interesting. He charters a little private plane to fly him up over it so he can take photographs. He's not under contract or anything. He's unemployed.
No,
this is just like I'll hire a plane.
He's a Reddit neckbeard.
Yeah.
I'm gonna fly over the dunes.
Right. And now one thing that I think interested him about it, and it doesn't say this out loud in the Brian Herbert biography, but what I think what he was interested in partially was the idea that you were going to take this sort of unstoppable force of nature, and then you were going to take nature and you were going to come up with like a more holistic thing. You're not going to build a wall. You're not going to put fans up. You're going to actually try and somehow in an integral fashion solve this problem. But you're going to plant grass, and now it's a green hill. And, I think that appealed to him.
Yeah. I see that.
That's sort of like,
it's just that West Coast kind of hippie.
Yeah.
Terraforming.
Right.
It's kind of neat.
Right. Yeah. Right. It's not, you're not wrestling with nature. You're trying to flow with it.
And that's what Dune is. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now
he takes his mother into the desert.
Somebody on Twitter said something great that was like, all Dune's about is going out to the desert to do drugs with your mom.
It is.
It is.
Kind of is. Yeah.
It is in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So now, okay, so he's got this idea for this story, right? The dunes, what they're doing with the dunes, all that. He sits down to start writing it as just a feature-length article. He's going to sell it to, who knows, Life magazine. I don't know where he's going to sell it. He doesn't know where he's going to sell it. But he realizes after like a week or two that like, oh man, I got something way bigger on my hands.
Yeah. He's figuring it out.
Right. Like the pieces start to come in.
The metaphor. Yeah. Oh, right. No.
And then he's starting to imagine like, wait,
this is where he drops acid.
Yeah.
This is where, yeah.
And he starts to think, well, wait, what if you had a whole planet that was a desert? What does that mean? And then this thing and then, okay, now what he knows about Islam starts to come in.
This is the early 60s?
Yeah, this would be like 1958.
And he's starting to think about Islam now?
A little bit, yeah. Well, he started thinking like, well, what is a desert? What are desert cultures? Well, Islamic cultures, Arab cultures.
Sure.
So he starts bringing that in. Stuff he already knew about Buddhism, stuff he knows about everything, because he's just got this encyclopedic mind. And again, I think Dune is, he found the thing that could hold everything he knew, and he could get it in there.
Dune.
Right.
Wow. I'm tripping, man.
Yeah.
No, I am. I'm tripping.
Yeah. So he spends, now that's 1957. He starts writing it. It takes years to get it done. Beverly.
I'm sorry.
Research.
Do you understand? No, but yeah. But can you imagine like sitting down and you're like, I'm gonna sit down and write Dune? Like, what does that even look like? What does it look like?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what. I would like to see his office during this time.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. What books are around? What's up on the chalkboard?
How is Dune today?
Right. How is it doing?
I'm really trying to imagine.
Yeah.
It's about what is your book about, honey?
Right.
It's about space people. Like what?
What do you start?
Where do you even begin? Like I guess in the 50s you have some context. You can say it's a science fiction novel and da-da-da.
Yeah.
But you're inventing the future.
Right, for sure. And I imagine for most people that he talked to, he probably put it in the context of like pulp science fiction adventure, right? Like, I'm writing the kind of thing you read in any old science fiction magazine, right? That'd be the easiest thing to point to.
Yeah.
The context here is important, I think. Beverly is the primary breadwinner. She's got a good job, but they're not rich. She's not an executive or something, or, you know, whatever. They're doing okay. And he's just staying home all day working on this crackpot book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like,
it's psychotic.
Right.
It is psychotic. I mean, let's just like, you're now, as soon as he sits down to write Dune, you're a madman.
Yeah.
You've got a kid by an ex-wife, and the IRS wants your money. Yeah. This is full blown.
Never had a job for more than like 2 years at once.
Right. Yeah, this is he is, of all the people that we've done, he's over the bridge.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. There's got to be like,
there's no family money. There's no like but I'm gonna write Dune.
Yeah. It's delusions of grandeur. In a way.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's just that they worked out, so they don't seem that delusional to
right. I mean, there are, for every Frank Herbert, there are 1,000 guys, you know, or women who don't make it.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So he spends years writing this book. At some point in the early 60s, they moved to San Francisco, mostly actually to advance Beverly's career. He didn't have anything going on in San Francisco. So to advance her career, she got a good job opportunity up there.
Oh, hey, feminism.
Yeah, man. And she was smart. She was a smart cookie. She was organized. Right. She was effective, right? So like, good for her.
This episode is like, she's the reason we have Dune.
Oh yeah.
So
that's
Beverly,
why I wanted to start with there.
Dynamite.
She deserves a lot of credit.
Helpful.
Now, also in the 60s, they live in the San Francisco area for most of the 60s. They befriend people like Robert Heinlein, who's very good friends with the Herberts. They meet Alan Watts and a number of other sort of less well-remembered science fiction writers. He knew Isaac Asimov. He became first name basis. He was friends with a lot of these people before Dune was even published, right? He sort of just integrated himself into that world. Now, let's see. Do I want to talk about... Well, so here's the thing. We've talked a lot about Dune, the book. We could talk about it more. The one thing that's been interesting to me is, as I was reading it, and I've read it 3 or 4 times now. I read it once earlier this year before I even thought to do this episode. And
just pick it up Dune randomly.
Reading
no big deal.
I read
Dune.
Yeah, that's right. I read Dune Messiah just recently, and the kind of thing I realized is like, yes, okay, it's science fiction, fine. And then it got me thinking like, okay, well, what is science fiction? Like, what do you mean? What do people mean when they read science fiction?
I think about that a lot.
And how does this fit in and how does it not fit in, right? So let me give you a couple of definitions of science fiction from people who ought to know. All right. Rod Serling, friend of the show. Fantasy is the impossible made probable. Science fiction is the improbable made possible. I don't really like that definition that much, to be honest. Isaac Asimov, who said in 1975, science fiction can be defined as that branch of literature which deals with the reaction of human beings to changes in science and technology. Okay. Somebody named Darko Suvin, who I'd never heard of, but I was interested by this definition. Science fiction is distinguished by the narrative dominance or hegemony of a fictional novum. You can tell this guy's an academic. Novum is, by the way, for the rest of us, is a novelty or an innovation. Validated by cognitive logic. So it's like you got something weird, and then you show why it logically makes sense that weird thing is, right? Philip K. Dick's got this long definition, but I'm going to read just one part of it. About science fiction, there must be a coherent idea involved in the dislocation of science fiction. That is, the dislocation must be a conceptual one, not merely a trivial or bizarre one. This is the essence of science fiction, the conceptual dislocation within the society so that, as a result, a new society is generated in the author's mind, transferred to paper, and from paper, it occurs as a convulsive shock in the reader's mind, the shock of disrecognition. He knows that it is not his actual world that he is reading about. So that's another kind of way to think about it. One thing that strikes me about what's going on in Dune, and maybe why this book is personal to me, and I know this show isn't about us, but I can't help but feel Dune in my own work, right? And I don't write, space operas necessarily, but the one thing I didn't realize how influenced I might have been by it until reading this biography and really thinking about it hard is a lot of the weird innovation stuff in Dune is actually happening inside people's heads. It's not really about the technology so much. There's technology there for sure, and it's a far advanced future, and there's some weird things going on there. But the presence of magic, of like vague psychic powers, of being able to see through time. The seeing through time thing isn't technology. They find a drug on some planet, and then they take it and they can see through time.
It's the thing about Dune is that Dune is history. Dune is not science fiction. Dune is not predicting any future. Dune is telling us about our past.
Yeah, you're right. And recontextualizing. It's a representation of myth, basically.
Yeah.
And
Dune,
And part of the reason I think Frank sent it so far in the future is he wanted to make it so there's no way to draw a line in calendar time between now and then. There's no way to say like, okay, the world of Dune is because, well, John F. Kennedy gets assassinated, and then this happens, and then this happens, and eventually you have Dune. He put it so far forward that like it severs any continuity from a timeline standpoint to what's going on now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what is Star Wars, right? In a galaxy.
Yeah.
How does it go?
Far away, galaxy far away, a long time ago.
That's the point. Is like the future is the past. I mean, because of the Protestant Reformation, like we are severed from our own history, like in the West, and it's very like a very serious way, and that's the thing that no one talks about. And everyone is like, coping with constantly. And it's
one of those things is if you get severed far enough away, you can't even really tell you're severed because you don't even know what you're missing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like,
this is not a Catholic podcast per se, but it's there. I mean, and it's so that, this is, I'm glad that they finally made Dune.
Yes.
My big beef with Dune, the new Dune, is that it does not trip hard enough.
I agree.
But I watched it a second time, and I liked it more the second time because I think that they did it on purpose.
Yeah. I
think that they
It'll be really interesting to see what move is made in part 2.
Oh my God.
Because part 2 in the book, like the parts that have not been covered yet in the book are even more psychedelic. It ramps up, and we're not there yet in the film quite. So it'll be interesting to see how that all gets handled.
Well, they absolutely have to make the movie. I mean,
there's no way around it now.
Yeah.
Protect Denis Villeneuve at all costs.
Yes, right. Yeah, right? Exactly. Our guy. Yeah. The other thing about Dune that like, how to say, is that it's the new Dune is about a guy who loses his father.
Yes.
And that means a lot to me. I lost my dad when I was very young, man.
Yeah.
And like, so the first time I saw it, it was like, it was very, very hard. It's fundamentally about like that, which all great drama is. It's about how do you, it goes all the way back to, how do you live in this world when you are made the patriarch of like,
I mean,
that's just the most obvious thing.
And fatherlessness and motherlessness is a trope that goes back to the first stories that anybody ever wrote down. I mean, it's always been there.
How do you live in the world?
Because it's how metaphorically deep it is. It resonates with you because you will actually go through that in some way. But it's also deep. It's also heavy on like a metaphysical level.
The thing that I appreciate about this new Dune is that it really does get that. It nails that in a way that's like, it was hard to watch. I mean, it's really intense.
There was a couple things to me that were, and I don't want to bag on the David Lynch version because I think part of why that not failed, but the part of the shortcomings of that were they didn't give it enough time.
Yeah.
It's too fast. And so they didn't get to build out some of the things they could. But two of the things that I think were better in this new version were the relationship with Paul and Duke Leto, his father, who Oscar Isaac did a fantastic job. That relationship felt real.
Yeah, it feels like a real,
Yeah. And then almost the secondary child-father relationship between Duncan Idaho and Paul was better. In the Lynch version, Duncan Idaho is not charismatic. He's not compelling really in any way, in particular. In the new film, like they feel like
the thing about the new film though too is that like it's just cool.
Yeah,
it's very cool.
It is very cool.
Like and it was always meant to be cool.
Yes.
Yeah. And the first one is too. Like
oh yeah,
Lynch's Dune is cool too.
Oh
but
yes,
like in a way
definitely worth a watch.
Yeah. Anyway, all right.
Yeah.
No, that's what it's all about. We're just talking about Dune, right? I mean, let's talk about how cool. I mean, it's very cool.
Oh, and it makes when the Freemen come up out of the sand when they're attacking. I almost lost it. I felt like I was 14 years old.
And then I even enjoy, they're like the first time that I watched it, I had a hard time. And because it means too much. It means too much. Right. So you're putting so much on it. And but the second time I watched it, when he wanders into the desert, leading his mother into the desert, desert. It's just like, oof. It's perfect. It's so good.
So I'm going to talk about the story of Dune getting published here in a minute, but I want to this is some information, some connections that I didn't quite make, but I suspected were always there. Okay. This is from the Brian Herbert biography again. And this is just talking about where his dad was drawing stuff. And so there's Zen Buddhism and there's Islam and there's, the Zen Sunni is actually the religion of the Fremen, right? Like there's these interesting, which is Zen and Sunni Islam, right? There's all all this stuff's building, but these connections he'd made deliberately that I wasn't aware of. So for the names of heroes, Herbert, selected from Greek mythology and other mythological bases. The Greek house Atreus, upon which House Atreides in Dune was based, was the family of kings Menelaus and Agamemnon. A heroic family was tragically beset by flaws and burdened with a curse pronounced on them by Thyestes. King Menelaus was the husband of Helen of Troy, whose abduction by Paris led to the 10-year Trojan War. Menelaus' brother, King Agamemnon, led the confederated Greek armies in the war. Upon returning from Troy, Agamemnon was murdered by his wife Clytemnestra. This suggested the troubles Frank Herbert had in mind for the Atreides family. The evil Harkonnens of Dune are related to the Atreides by blood, so when they kill Paul's father, Duke Leto, it is kinsman killing kinsman, just as occurred in the house of Agamemnon. I cannot say that.
Agamemnon.
I kind of know it, but as I'm reading, it's like...
I know.
In Greek mythology, Leto was the mother of Apollo and Artemis. In Dune, Duke Leto is a man, the opposite sex of the mythological base. Dad said he did this in order to highlight a Janus facing in the story. Janus was an ancient Roman god with two bearded faces, one looking forward and the other looking backward. One of the children of Duke Leto, Paul, can look far into the future, while the other child, Aaliyah, can see far into the past. The Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Moyheim was in part named after Helen of Troy. The characters fit classical archetypes from mythology. Paul is the hero prince on a quest, as described by Carl Gustav Jung, Joseph Campbell, and Lord Raglan. One of the books my father studied, Raglan's The Hero, published in 1936, outlined 22 steps followed by classic heroes. These included A, the hero's father is a king. B, the circumstances of the conception are unusual. C, he is reputed to be the son of a god. D, an attempt is made to kill him at birth. E, after a victory over the king and or a giant dragon or wild beast, he, F, marries a princess, and G becomes king, right? So the broad patterns, Frank isn't inventing them, and none of us are inventing them, really. He's doing this in a focused way. Now you see the same thing of reading all of the box of the books of Westerns to figure out the formula, but now he's doing it at a level at which almost no one else has ever done it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's all in what you put in those spaces and how you make it feel. It's not about a dramatic plot that nobody's nobody's ever seen before necessarily, right? It's about telling the old stories in a new way.
Yeah, you verge on cliche as soon as you start to talk about the hero's journey and all the rest of it. But we really do want that story.
We do,
because it's how we survive.
Right.
Exactly. It really is fundamental. You're talking about earlier, like technology, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's right
there.
And all the big adventure movies in particular, Star Wars does this. It's part of the reason it was so popular, is it follows all of these steps. And even most movies now, they don't necessarily do the whole hero's journey, but they do a little part of it, right? It's like,
that's
like
true.
2 or 3 steps of it or something.
Right.
Instead of the whole thing, because you can imply the rest of it often.
Yeah, so, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. It's again Protestant.
Yeah, a bit.
Yeah. We're not going to tell the whole story.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about. I want to talk about Dune's actual publication, because I found the story.
You take 90 seconds. I got to stand up. I got to use the bathroom. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Look at this. This is going to be a long one.
Yeah. We're done.
Yeah. Okay. I'll be right back.
You want to keep going?
Yeah, I'm coming back. All right. I got to use the bathroom.
Okay, so here's the story of how Dune gets published. So, in 1960, Beverly's got this job in San Francisco. Frank makes friends there. We kind of talked about this. Now, the legend is that Dune was rejected 23 publishers. And now this is sort of true, except for the fact that it was accepted for publication immediately by the magazine Analog. Analog was one of these pulp science fiction magazines that came along in the wake of Astounding Science Fiction, which I think had been shuttered a couple of years before. And they were going to run it between December of 1963 and February of 1964. They paid Frank $20,000 in today's dollars, which is not too shabby, except for the fact that he's been working on the book for 6 years. Now, it's also kind of hard to imagine getting paid any kind of money for publication in the magazine for writing fiction, but that's a 2021 problem. Now, this was just the first part. This was what, if you're reading the first volume of the Dune series, this is book 1 in the book Dune. This is what he gets paid $20,000 to serialize in Analog. Now, when he's trying to get it published as a book, this is where we run into problems. It was rejected by 23 publishers. Many thought it was quite good. Now, there was an editor who said, this might be the biggest mistake of my career, but I'm going to pass. And sure enough, it would be the greatest mistake of his career. A big part of the problem was it's just too big of a book to print and market. Or at least that's what these editors think, It's too big to publish all of Dune. In each part, so the book Dune is separated into quote unquote 3 books, but they're all one volume. Dune Messiah is sort of Dune Part 2. It was too big with the 3 parts, and each part wasn't quite enough to stand on its own, right? So publishers didn't want to publish it as a 3-part series, and publishers didn't want to publish it all as one. And so he's kind of left in, again, this position that had haunted him through his attempts to publish short stories and things, that he didn't, he had very little respect for the conventions of the medium when it came to format and length and that sort of thing. So the question then is, so nobody wants it. 23 publishers reject it. How does it actually become a printed thing? This is the story that I loved about it. Okay, so it's in it's in Analog, and it does pretty well. It gets a little bit of a readership. There's this guy named Sterling E. Lanier, who was a kind of a small-time science fiction writer himself, and he was an editor of Chilton Books. Chilton Books still exists to this day, and they're primarily known for publishing automotive manuals, appliance manuals, business-to-business magazines, trade publications, and that sort of thing. That's still what they do to this day, and this is what they did then. When books 2 and 3 of Dune, still what we know of as the first volume of Dune, but when they started to get serialized, Lanier reaches out to Frank Herbert's agent. Lanier wants to publish all three, Lanier, who wants to publish all three parts of Dune 1 that have been have been serialized. But obviously it's too big. Obviously it's too long. And the question remains, why did they let him publish it? He works for Chilton. Chilton publishes manuals for cars. They publish how to put together office furniture or whatever.
Wait, what? So who did he send this book to? What?
So after getting rejected by 23 publishers, Sterling Lanier, who's the editor of Chilton Books, reaches out to Herbert's agent. Chilton Books publishes automotive. They still are on to this day. They publish automotive manuals.
I love this.
They publish business to business
magazines
and stuff, trade magazines and stuff.
All my mutuals just start sending your schizo tweets to
And this is what's crazy, even crazier. This is what this company still does now, right? They did it then. They published Dune, and then they do it. They still they didn't switch gears.
That's hilarious,
right?
That's amazing. We just published one of the most important novels of the 20th century.
Yeah. Back to business as usual.
Back to business. Yeah.
So there's an interesting thing, and Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son, says this. He doesn't say this in writing any place, but he said this in a talk he was giving. So the question is why did Sterling Lanier do this? And why did they let him do it, right? Why he's not the president of Chilton Books. He's an editor, and he's got some sway. But apparently there were some people at Chilton Books that effectively wanted to give Sterling Lanier enough rope to hang himself. They were trying to get rid of him.
Are you kidding me?
They were like, this kook wants to publish. Yeah, let him do it. Let's see how that goes.
We'll get rid of Sterling. That. Right, yeah, I love that.
It's so great, right?
This show is a friend of all Sterlings.
Yes, that's right.
That's amazing. The thing about Dune is it's the most American story.
Oh yeah,
this is so American. It's incredible.
Absolutely. Yeah,
the Stones, the Beatles. You have all that. That's they're LARPing. Our blues and our music and da da da.
Yeah,
this is us LARPing Western civilization.
Right. Yeah,
we won.
Yeah,
we did. That's dynamite. And Villeneuve, right?
Yeah, Frenchman comes in, kills it.
That's it. Yep.
Yeah. Actually, I don't know. Is he French or is he
Quebecois? I don't know.
He might be Quebecois.
I don't know.
So anyway, Frank sells it.
The
Frank's
Human Torch was denied a bank loan.
I know. It's been going on. I've been rapid fire here for so long. I'm starting
you're killing it. No, I'm vibing.
So Frank's like, hey man, nobody wanted to buy this thing. If they want to put it out, let's do it. Chilton pays him $70,000 in today's dollars.
It's not bad. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well,
it's not Floki money, but
he'd already made $30,000, I think, having it serialized in Analog Magazine. So far, Frank's in on.
They're starting to. Yeah. I think that they probably, because again, it's a situation of the Grudge, right? They're probably oh, this is something.
Yes.
Yeah.
So 1965 comes out. It would win the Hugo and the Nebula. I think it was the first year of the Nebula Award. For people who don't know, these are like the Pulitzer for science fiction. Maybe that's not quite right. This is the big award. You win a Hugo, you win a Nebula, you are a big deal in the science fiction world.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure.
Your peers are acknowledging what you've done.
Yeah. And so Dune won, both of these books, and he would win some for the sequels as well.
Just hang on. They're so good. The books are so good.
They are.
I can't overstate how good those books are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. They're fantastic. Yeah.
They're so good.
I was blown away by Dune Messiah too. Actually.
Incredible.
I had read it years ago, but I really, I read it, I think, as a teenager, and I'm much, now that I've read so much more, I understand, oh yeah, this is just as good as anything else.
It's the thing about it that's so difficult is that it is in conversation. When you read those books and you try to appreciate other art, everything is going to be in reference to Dune.
Yeah.
It's corny. It sounds corny. But they're in conversation with everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like that's why neckbeard nerds,
love it.
It's why
it deserves it. Yeah,
no, it deserves it. It's amazing. It's as good as it gets.
It really is. So if you have folks out there haven't read it, like just
read Dune.
It's
just go read Dune.
And listen, this isn't like, and also like I have a lot of books that I think people should read that I understand are difficult. Like I think most people should probably read Ulysses and Moby Dick, but I also get that like it's kind of hard, you know. Dune,
this is not. No, it's fun.
You can read.
It's a banger.
Fun to read.
Dune's a banger.
Yeah, it's a page turner. It's not confused. There's nothing. You don't have to know everything about what happened, and it just works.
There's something about it where it just works, like you say. It lives on its own terms, and it just sort of like it grabs you from the go. Yeah, it's recognizable. The world of Dune is a world that somehow.
Right. Yeah, you've kind of had a precognitive dream about it.
Well, and that's the metaphor of what it is, right? Like we're all living in. Well, where this
yeah. So okay, so I'm going to back up. So once Dune gets published, it's just more and more and more and more success. The train never stops at this point, right? So I'm not going to hit every point of his career necessarily because it's all pretty much up. But I do want to.
That's awesome.
I do want to.
I love that.
I do want to talk about his family.
Is he? Yeah, I was going to say. How's he doing at this point?
Yeah. So obviously, he's excited about this. He continues to work a normie job until he's like until like 67 or 68. He quits right at first when he sells the book, but then he ends up having to go back. He becomes the education editor for the University of Washington, for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, but this puts him in relationship with the University of Washington.
I think my dad went to the University of Washington.
Really?
Briefly,
apparently it's a very good school.
It's a good school.
One thing that's interesting that happens on this is we're flashing forward a little bit, but it's worth noting. As working for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, he meets a guy who's doing like agricultural science at the University of Washington. This guy invites him to go to Vietnam and learn about like agricultural planning and land use and that kind of thing. But the Vietnam War is happening. And Frank goes. He goes on he's going to write an article about land use in Vietnam while there's a war happening. He ends up writing a bunch of articles for the Seattle Post-Intelligencer about the Vietnam War and further embeds himself into the hippie culture, right? Because he's writing front page articles.
They were not built the way that we are now. Like the writers of old were not. They're wired differently.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And then there's some other things kind of going on. Now his kids are starting to grow up, obviously 1965. I think Brian was born in 1948. So, he's, is that right? Yeah. So he's coming to be 20 when Dune comes out. Now, Brian,
that generation.
Yeah. He's a boomer. It's funny because I read this and in my head, he's a kid and they're like, now Brian and Bruce had difficult relationships with him. The whole lie detector thing. His dad's kind of dictatorial. He demanded silence when he was working, so much so that the kids would kind of just leave the house often because he couldn't handle a creaking floorboard outside or anything.
Trying to think about what that was like to be the son of the guy who wrote Dune.
Right.
Trying to imagine.
Yeah. And the thing is you could be angry with him and be like, why is he in there? He's writing these stupid stories. Nobody cares. He's not being my dad. He's not blah, 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 blah. Oh, he wrote Dune?
He wrote Dune.
Wait, what happened?
Yeah. Not to nerd out too hard, but I mean, it's...
Yeah, it's sort of reverse justified.
It's the thing about Dune and this whole thing is nothing in life will ever be as grand as the vision that you execute on the page.
Right.
That's the whole problem. That's why we all gripe about the movie.
Right.
It's like it's never gonna. You will never live up to like whatever is going on in your head, Dad.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Right.
It's like what are you left with?
Yeah.
He's Catholic.
Oh,
super
for sure.
Catholic.
Yeah. So Brian has a strained relationship with his dad that wouldn't change for. Brian never read. So Brian, who wrote the follow-up novels along with another guy, following Frank's death, wrote additional, continuations and prologues and things of the Dune series. Brian never read any of his dad's writing until 1974. He's almost 30 years old because he kind of resented his father and how he'd used his time. Now, eventually they would come together and they would be quite friendly and spend a lot of time together, but it took a long time. I mean, Brian was like 30 before they could really talk to each other. Now with Bruce, it was a different story, and this is going to get a little bit dark. So Bruce, a little bit younger than Brian, was gay, closeted through most of his teenage years. When they were living in,
he was a gay. Is that what you said?
Is that what I said?
No, I'm just teasing.
He was gay. He was homosexual.
Yes.
And while they were living in San Francisco, he got really involved in the drug scene, and not necessarily the kind of drugs,
not the fun drugs
like Dune.
Yeah, right.
He was getting into methamphetamines and things like that.
No good.
And now Frank never put too fine of a point on this, but Bruce would claim this later, and it may have been true, that Frank and Beverly could never accept that he was gay. And it apparently strained their relationship right up until the end. Mm-hmm. As Beverly was getting sick, it was like, family, come be with us. Well, not you, Bruce. Oh. And so, yeah, so I just want to kind of lay that there. That's sort of there, and it's hard to ignore. I read this Reddit thing, and this isn't verifiable because it's just something I read on Reddit, where like a guy said that his dad had briefly worked with Bruce Herbert in like Iowa someplace. And they were doing like HVAC work or something, and it took some time before Bruce like said like, yeah, Frank Herbert's my dad. And eventually, he said like, yeah, I mean, he just never would let me be part of the Herbert, like,
really?
I kind of wasn't allowed to be part of the family in a way after a while. So, and who knows how true that is. And I'm sure there were conversations and, whatever, but it's certainly there.
No, let's, we've got to stop, and, that's tough.
He's a human, frankly, he's a human being.
That's
right?
tough. I mean, this is probably the thing that we're not supposed to talk about, which is, how you lean into it.
Right.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah. Kind of, we're getting close to the end. I got a couple of things I got to touch on here.
We can talk. Brad's got a couple of things.
We can talk as much as you want about Dune, because I want to nerd out.
I love.
We could have just done an episode where he's nerded out about Dune for 3 hours, but that wouldn't have really been the Art of Darkness way. Okay, so 1965, Dune came out. 1969, Dune Messiah comes out. It's a little bit less well received because, for people who don't know, Dune Messiah only has like 2 action scenes in it. The rest is like all like either like just like backroom maneuverings, weird conversations, religious visions, and then it kind of just then Paul just walks out into the desert.
Yeah.
It's very like it's great, it's brilliant, but it's not Buck Rogers. It's very like, and I loved it. I was there for every second.
Yeah, amazing.
But yeah, it's
yeah. Not gonna make it.
Yeah. So now 69. Now here's the other thing. Between Dune coming out in 65 and Dune Messiah coming out in 69. Frank writes a bunch of other books. Some of this stuff was stuff he'd been trying to get published and nobody wanted. A book called The Green Brain, a book called The Eyes of Heisenberg in 1966. A book
The
called
Eyes of Heisenberg.
It's a good title.
Yeah, it's a good title.
A book called The Heaven Makers in 1968. A book called Santa Roga Barrier also in 1968. Most of these were also serialized in science fiction magazines before. Let me give you a rundown of Santa Roga Barrier.
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about all his books, but I want to pick one and kind of tell you. So we can get Dune's one thing, and that's enough for anybody. But I think if we can see what he wrote in another book, maybe we can get an even better idea of how Herbert's brain worked. Okay. So this is just from the Wikipedia, but I think it's good. A psychologist, Gilbert Dasein, literally the same Heideggerian concept.
Dasein.
Dasein? Okay.
Yeah, Dasein.
I trust you on that.
The thing. Yeah.
Is hired by corporate interests to investigate Santa Roga, a Southern California town in a valley where marketing seems totally ineffective. Outside businesses are allowed in, but wither quickly for lack of business. Santa Rogans aren't hostile toward the enterprises, they just won't shop there, nor are they xenophobic. They instead appear maddeningly self-satisfied with their quaint local lifestyle. Adding an element of danger, the last few psychologists sent in have all died in accidents that are seemingly perfectly plausible. Complicating matters further still, the psychologist's college girlfriend, Jenny, has returned to Santa Roga, her hometown. With this in mind, the psychologist cautiously enters the town and quickly learns of jaspers, an additive in the food and drink commonly ingested in Santa Roga that seems to imbue the consumer with greater health and an expanded mind. Within the Santa Rogan community, jaspers was described as quote-unquote consciousness fuel, which opened a person's eyes and ears and turned on their minds. Those who consume it don't become psychic. Instead, they're simply far more lucid than the average citizen, although there are numerous hints at a group mind operating at a subconscious level. Their newspapers are vaguely subversive with their folksy, enlightened commentary on world affairs. Their dinner conversations knowledgeably reference great theories of psychology, politics, and cognitive science. Right, and I could keep going, but
no, it's very funny.
It's like a domestic Dune in a way, sort of, right? Like it's like kitchen sink Dune.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, it's the theater. Yeah.
Right.
It's so funny. Kitchen sink Dune. Dune is awesome.
Yes. Yeah. So 1969, Dune Messiah comes out. It's like I said, it's kind of weird in terms of depending on what your expectations were. But he gets a big boost from Kevin. Are you familiar with the Whole Earth catalog? Does that ring a bell?
Oh yeah. Oh, now we're talking. Of course.
Whole Earth catalog. Steve Jobs referred to it as Google before Google.
Yeah, these people invented the future.
They really did. It was like a hippie magazine, but also a product
catalog. It was like a
catalog. Zine. Yeah, it was like a zine, but you could buy stuff through it. And then there was just articles about various like sustainability things or various, far out ideas. And the first issue
invented the future.
They really did. They really did. And a lot of like the early generation of like Silicon Valley tech bros were all Whole Earth catalog collectors. Right?
They're on the mailing list. Yeah, for sure.
A lot of them. Steve Jobs and all those guys were. I don't know about Bill Gates. He was probably a little too tight.
No, he was.
Yeah. So the first issue of Whole Earth Catalog did a big spread on Dune. So that. There
you go. Boom.
Solidly.
Boom.
Hippie.
Boom.
Right.
Yeah.
So, he's influential on the thing that was influential on everybody else.
Everything else.
Right.
Yeah.
So we could do, digging into the Whole Earth catalog would be, and it's not maybe even the right fit for our show, but it would be fascinating for somebody out there to do.
Well, we got a lot of time.
We could get there.
Artofdarkpod.com.
Yeah. 1972, Herbert published.
That's actually crazy. Like I knew that without knowing that.
Oh, like, it made sense when I read it. It made perfect sense.
He was pivotal to this whole thing.
1972, Herbert publishes his only non-science fiction novel called Soul Catcher. It's almost won the National Book Award. Robert Redford tried to turn it into a movie for years, and I can't remember if they didn't say why it never ended up getting made. Let me just read the back of it. I read a little bit of it. I have a nice vintage copy that a friend
looks good.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, that's good.
So the back of it. No longer Charles Huberhead, imitation white man. He was Katsuk, the center, the core from which all perception radiates. And his victim was David Marshall, 13-year-old son of an undersecretary of state, an innocent from the modern white world chosen for an ancient sacrifice of vengeance.
What the fuck? I'm sorry, not safe for work. What the fuck?
Yeah.
What is going on?
Yeah, pretty intense. I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, but it's pretty short. I read some of it. You forget that
those guys, they were all.
Oh, he was out there for sure.
Oh yeah.
And now by the time Dune,
yeah, they were all out. They were far out, man.
Oh yeah.
They were so far out.
For sure. Now by the early 1970s, so 72, that book comes out. Herbert can honestly do whatever he wants at this point.
Yeah, money.
He has a class at the University of Washington in the early 70s. It's technically a political science class called Utopia/Dystopia. That's what the class is called. It's about utopian societies and myth structures. And includes a survival weekend out in the woods where he gave you no instructions.
It's so unfair that we're doing a podcast. It is so unfair.
I want to run this class.
I want to run the Utopia Dystopia.
Yeah. And it wasn't a writing class. It wasn't a literature class. It was a whole Earth catalog class. Like, you know what I mean?
Can you imagine?
Oh, it would have been great.
Oh my God.
So they did this survival weekend and he gave them no instructions. You were just supposed to show up. Right.
I love
One girl came with a suitcase wearing high heels just because they were like, well, I don't know what we're doing. Like, and she had to survive on the weekend in the woods.
Frank.
Right? Yeah.
Crazy.
Right.
Amazing.
He and Beverly buy, after he starts making some money, they buy 6 acres on the Olympic Peninsula in Washington. And they name it Xanadu.
Yeah. Now he's balling.
Oh, he is.
He's getting it done.
Yeah, and this is the early 70s, right? He's cool. He's popular.
He's cool.
He's famous.
He's famous. Yeah.
He's not famous in a cheap way either.
Right.
He's respected.
He's as good as it gets. Yeah, exactly.
He's respected like intellectually and creatively, but he's also cool. Right.
Yeah.
Which isn't, those two things don't always go hand in hand. Right?
Led Zeppelin.
Right. Yeah. Right. So he's right there.
You get to be backstage with the Zepp.
Yeah, it's awesome. Yeah. It's great. It's great. Yeah, and he in a way he's won, right? It's 1970s. He believed in himself. He buys this Xanadu. He's doing these weird sustainability projects out there where like he's like building like a solar furnace and like all these kooky projects that he's doing.
No, this is the kind of fame that I want to have.
Yeah,
that's the fame that I want.
A compound out in the peninsula.
I want a compound.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So it's going really well. And because of this level of success, he's able to start knitting his family back together, right? He's bringing Brian back in. He's bringing Penny in more. He's sort of starting to pay back all of his years of ignoring people and whatever.
Yeah.
And it's going well, and the money's coming in, and maybe they're spending a little more than is coming in, but it looks like he's skyrocketing. So who cares? Because the next book's going to sell 1 million copies anyway. We're good. And then in 1974, Beverly gets sick, right? She's in her 40s, right? She's 47 years old, something like that. It's early for her to get sick. She gets cancer. We talked about this a little bit. She gets cancer. She gets cured basically from cancer, but the treatment damages her heart, and she never ends up recovering from that. It's 10 years of kind of slow decline. Now, in these 10 years, Frank, it doesn't necessarily happen right at first, but Frank starts to flop. Rather than being dependent on her to take care of everything, he starts to take care of everything for her, right? He's managing, maybe her appointments. He's carrying her at times. When she's feeling a little better, she would often swim. He had a pool built so she could swim laps. That was like the best form of exercise. So he would make sure she could do that. And, he would stand there and jump in if she started to have a hard time. He was there constantly. And the thing that started to destroy Frank a little bit was he did that, but he also didn't give up on writing. So all he did was just not sleep. So for years, he's sleeping like 3-4 hours a night, right? He's just kind of gradually destroying himself a little bit. And then by the time you get to, we're going to kind of speed up here because I think a lot of the interesting stuff in terms of how did Dune come about, we've kind of already hit a lot of that. But the slow kind of decline, he starts to build this place out in Hawaii. And I don't know if you've ever been to Hawaii, Kevin. Some listener out there, I'm sure, has done the Road to Hana, which is a big tourist attraction in Hawaii. He built a place in Hana. And this was a place, it's like far flung, but at the time, everybody who lived out there who wasn't a native Hawaiian was like a celebrity. Like Charles Lindbergh had a house out there, and like a number of there's some famous actor from like the golden era who had a house out there too, right? That's cool. And it's remote. Like, you can't get electricity out there. It's a dirt road to get out there, but you're on the coast and you're looking out over the ocean in this place that they gradually built. And this is where Beverly wanted to end. This is where she wanted to be when it all ended, was out on this island. Now, it didn't happen right away. So we got to talk about one thing here too. So starting in 1980, we're starting to talk about doing David Lynch's Dune, right? The conversation has begun. Now, Alejandro Jodorowsky has already tried and failed to make Dune. I don't know if we want to go into that too much, except to say that literally, I don't know if maybe it's my favorite. One of my 5 favorite documentaries of all time, I have a poster of it right there. Jodorowsky's Dune is a documentary about the attempt to make by Alejandro Jodorowsky to make Dune.
Alejandro Jodorowsky, it's over his right shoulder.
Yes,
and he has the poster.
Yeah. The poster for the documentary, right? And it's very Dune-like. It's very The cool thing about that project, there was a couple of things. One, Alejandro Jodorowsky is a freaking madman.
Yeah,
and he made The Holy Mountain, which is one of the trippiest movies of all time. Yeah. Almost incoherent.
John Lennon.
Also
John Lennon loved The Holy Mountain.
Yeah. He made El Topo, which is this crazy psychedelic Western. Yeah. And then he tried to make Dune, and he made nothing but insane decisions. Salvador Dali was going to play Baron Harkonnen. Right. Awesome. Pink Floyd was going to do the music for one of the planets. Every planet was going to have its own score, and he hired like the Rolling Stones, Pink Floyd, and somebody else to do it.
That rocks.
Right?
That rocks.
He brought together this special effects team, including Giger, who would later go on to contribute to like Star Wars and stuff. Like, he brought them together, and the project failed, but they were all like. Now they were Hollywood guys.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
It's like this weird thing that never happened.
They were all tripping. They were all tripping balls. They were all stoned to the gills.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how we should be again. Yeah, we all have to trip, my friends. Trip.
I'm down. Sign me up.
I'm so down for the future of like when our generation trips and
finally gets around to doing it.
Yeah.
So anyway, watch Jodorowsky's Dune. People.
Watch Jodorowsky's Dune.
It will make you. This is the cool thing about Jodorowsky making that film. When he talked to people who were going to be in it, he would ask them, "Are you ready to be a cosmic warrior for me?"
Yeah,
like that was what he wanted. He was like, "We are fighting. Like we're like." Fighting this
100%
metaphysical battle by making this film.
That's what that movie is about. That's what Dune is about. Dune is about a cosmological war.
Yeah, and Jodorowsky knew that. Jodorowsky knew that. I think David Lynch, I'm sure, understood.
I think David Lynch knew that. Yeah.
Now, David Lynch, there's issues with that film, and I think primarily the issue is it's not long enough. David Lynch tried to make a 4.5-hour movie, and then he didn't have final cut rights.
Oh, yeah.
So it just got slashed into nothing.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is the studios were trying to capitalize on Star Wars, right?
Right.
They're trying this is the Star Wars, but it's better. Mm-hmm. And so there was all these weird merchandising decisions. There's Dune coloring books and Dune, it didn't make any sense. It was the most heavily promoted movie ever. It had a bigger promotional budget than anything.
That's hilarious.
That Dune. And it had a pretty high production budget too, but the promotional budget was through the frickin' roof, right?
Yeah.
And there were all kinds of merchandising ideas. Beverly actually had some funny ones. Frank Herbert's wife. She said they should make a big stuffed like sandworm for children is one thing she wanted to do. And then she also wanted to do a breakfast cereal called Melange, right? Which would like turn the milk yellow, you know?
Yeah, that's
like
awesome.
Hilarious.
Yeah. The spice must flow.
Yeah. So, you know, ultimately the movie didn't end up making a profit, but it was a big deal at the time. It was heavily promoted. The book was popular. The book was
people because you have to contextualize this in terms of like Lynch at the time. That was after the Elephant Man? I think. Which was, he was Hollywood's idol.
Right.
He was the next thing. He was going to be the Spielberg from the Midwest. Right. And then he drops this on everyone.
Yeah. And everybody was looking forward to it. So the premiere was attended by literally 1,000 people, including Ronald Reagan was there for some reason. Ronald Reagan claimed to have really liked it.
I bet. Yeah. Well, he's good taste.
Yeah. Well, he did. Yeah. So just it's interesting. You start
strange.
I love how this story, I love doing this story because it starts in 1920, like out in the middle of the woods.
Yeah.
And then by the time I get to the end of it, David Lynch is a character.
Yeah.
And Ronald Reagan is a character somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also Isaac Asimov is it's very cool.
Oh, I mean, this is the thing. America is so weird, man. It is the trip never ends.
Yeah.
We're a part of it, man.
Yeah.
It's
so
trippy.
Yeah. So the movie doesn't do all that well. Frank's disappointed in it. He loved it at first, but then kind of started to grumble about it. He got upset because technically he believed that they stole some ideas from Dune Messiah, and technically they didn't have the film rights to Dune Messiah. Watching it, I couldn't see exactly what he was talking about, to be honest, but it might very well be there.
It's, that movie is very psychedelic. It's super psychedelic.
Yeah. So we're kind of winding down because now in 1984, two big things happen in Frank Herbert's life. One is that Beverly dies. She dies on February 7th of 1984. She had made Frank a list of promises of things that he had to do after she died. And Frank set out to do all of them. One was to write a book with Brian. Another one was to find love again. Like there were a series of these things he was supposed to do. It really is, right?
That's very sweet.
Yeah.
Very American.
Yeah. And Frank does, despite the fact that he, there's no real talk about him being someone who caroused or stepped out on Beverly. He does, he gets married in 1985. He gets married to a much younger woman, Teresa Shackelford. The Dune film has come out. So in 2 years, his wife has died. The Dune movie comes out. It's a terrible disappointment at the box office. He makes some money, but he was counting on ongoing royalties on profit, right? So it's like, now what?
Oh my God. Right. God.
I mean, you're probably expecting millions, right?
Oh,
this is going to be Star
millions. Wars. It's going to be Star Wars Part 2. Yeah. Oh.
Right.
Brutal.
And then 1986, and he's got some other books. There's a book in 1982 that comes out, White Plague, which is about Irish politics, but there's also like a genocidal pandemic that goes on at the same time. It's kind of crazy, but it was actually pretty well received apparently.
Yeah, maybe thinking about that.
But yeah, so 1984. Now we're kind of winding down because 1986, Frank gets diagnosed with cancer. Now he had struggled in grief over Beverly, like losing his mind, couldn't sleep, making crazy phone calls to people, all these things, just as you would, you tied your life to this person.
Can't even imagine.
Yeah. And she dies and she's 57, right?
Yeah,
it's like
that's too
you're supposed to, and like I said in the beginning, she did manage to survive. I was like, we were finally getting to enjoy our accomplishments.
Right.
And,
right,
you know, we
right,
had another
right.
10, 20, 30 years ahead of us and that we were supposed to do this. And so Frank kind of loses it and he gets cancer. And I don't think you can separate the stress of that. You know, it does feel a little bit like it's one of these, like, you know, somebody dies and then their spouse dies a year later. It feels a little like that. 1985, he gets cancer. First, they think it's diverticulitis. Then they think it's Crohn's disease, blah, 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 blah. Ends up it's cancer. He goes through a series of treatments. They cut some of the cancer out. They do something called hyperthermia, which they heat your body up to 108 degrees Fahrenheit to try and kill the cancer cells. He goes through chemotherapy, all this stuff. And then ultimately, he's in the hospital for a procedure in 1986, February 11th of 1986, 2 years and 4 days from the day that Beverly died. And he's sitting in his hospital bed on the typewriter and he has a pulmonary embolism and he passes away at age 66. His last book, Chapter House Dune, had come out shortly before that. He was working on the next Dune. But that was it. And despite the fact that he was sick, it was kind of a surprise for everybody. You know, it was a surprise for Brian, his son, who'd managed to kind of knit a relationship together with him again. And it was a surprise for, you know, all of his friends and all the people who cared about him. And everybody was looking forward to the next installment of Dune for sure. So yeah, I mean, I guess we always leave these on a sad note a little bit. But yeah, that's the life of Frank Herbert and
Frank Herbert
table. Yeah.
Boom. You did it. You got it done. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
Brilliant, man. And
brilliant.
If you haven't read the books, see the movie.
Just
read the first book,
read Dune.
It's so good.
It's so good.
And this is two guys who are kind of picky about this sort of thing.
Yeah,
yeah. I don't thumbs up everything or even most things.
It's so good.
It's an essential reading.
Dune is the thing. Dune is the thing that you, when you're 14 or you're 16 or you're 26, just read Dune. It's so good.
Yeah.
It will give you insights into.
And literally have a copy around of it in case some teenager is curious.
Yes.
You know, in case whoever, a nephew, a neighbor kid, somebody might want to, read if you're the one that gave them Dune, you might just change their life. So.
That's right. What do we have on the After Dark episode, Brad? What's coming up?
A couple things for you Patreon folks, and sign up on Patreon if you want to talk about this. We're going to go deeper into the Frank Herbert drug angle. I've got some other stuff that Brian Herbert helpfully left out of the biography, but I've got a couple of other things. And then we're going to talk about a couple of bad Dune takes that have been floating around on Twitter that I thought were worth talking about.
The new movie is not psychedelic enough.
That's a fair criticism.
It is I
agree.
And I love the new movie, but artofdarkpod.com. I'm Kevin Couchman, and this is Brad Kelly.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Dynamite. All right.